there's not really a lot of matchup-focused videos. Most of the stuff that's been done is like breakdowns of sets that players have played and giving little tidbits of information about specific things that come up or situations that come up as they come up. And while that is a good way to get and give information about a matchup, there is a lot of things that get left out when doing something like that. So these videos are meant as a long form way of doing character breakdowns, and that's going to include offense and defense for both characters. Um, so it's meant to not only help the Yun player, but it's meant to help players of other characters deal with the matchup themselves. And that's not always going to be easy, but there's going to be all sorts of information from covering neutral, covering options that both characters have in neutral, the options that they have in specific set play scenarios, frame traps you have to look out for, how things vary based on position. So how crouching medium kick has different uses mid-screen versus in the corner, because Chun-Li gains access to different tools in the corner as far as being able to be more oppressive off of this button, whereas mid-screen, as an example, you can just jump away as Yun. The only thing that Chun-Li can do is like hard jump after you with stomp, or try to follow you with like jump HP, or jump light kick or something like that, right? So past that, we'll be talking about character-specific set play from Yun's point of view, as well as ways to get things like universal overhead to function, and sort of the rock paper scissors that exists on a character by character basis inside of Ganejin when you're using things like forward medium kick, or you're pressuring, trying to get decisions out of your opponent. So the first thing I want to talk about is mid-screen, why jumping is so powerful in this matchup in general. So when Yun is jumping, he doesn't really have to worry about being hit by Chun-Li mid-screen. And one of the reasons for this is because standing fierce punch pushes him all the way across the stage. Back heavy punch also pushes him all the way across the stage. So even if he gets anti-aired trying to dive kick or jump in, he's going to get pushed so far away that it just reestablishes neutral. So depending on what other buttons you hit Yun with, changes where he lands. So standing medium punch also pushes him relatively far away. But a dash also puts you in range to actually contest different things. So even though you're plus here, you're not guaranteed to get that crouching medium kick. Unless you hit at like a very specific point in the right after the apex. So the Chun-Li player has to know exactly what she's doing here. But as an example, if I were to do dash up fierce punch instead, or dash up stand roundhouse, these will both connect if the Yun decides that they want to jump. So the rock paper scissors after anti-airing with something like this at a mid-range is a little bit more dangerous, and Yun can't just freely jump. Because if he does, he's put into a situation where if he gets hit by that close stand roundhouse, Chun-Li can just super him. And back fierce will just push him more towards the corner. So when you do something like this and then you back fierce and you're able to follow up again, you can put yourself in this situation as Chun where dive kicks may or may not be strong. And also, if he back jumps here, he's essentially cornered, right? Now, stuff like far standing medium kick is not going to be a great anti-air, and you don't really put yourself in position after this to do a whole lot, right? Right? You're out of range of pretty much everything. So hitting Yun with a far standing medium kick is a bad anti-air. Right? Now, if you sweep, as an example, and he doesn't quick rise, you're guaranteed to get your Oki. And if he does quick rise, then you're at range where you can still pressure with crouching medium kick, whatever you sort of want to do. You can use back fierce, and all these different decisions to sort of stifle his decisions on Oki, right? So it's one of the worst situations for Yun to be in, because trying to backdash against like a Chun-Li Oki is gonna get you killed, especially if she has super. But in situations where you're getting knocked down, an anti-air like this happens at a very specific time. And that's like if Chun-Li is walking back at a range where she knows that a dive kick will whiff, and she can hit you with this and take priority over your dive kick in some situations. Or just sort of YOLO does it as a jump, like as you're jumping in, trying to do like jump in medium kick or something like that. So as far as other choices go, you have stuff like standing jab, which if I hit Yun at this sort of max distance with stand jab, it pushes him back to 163 pixels away from me. And if I hit him with far roundhouse, it keeps him a little bit closer. If I walk forward a step and I stand roundhouse, he's even closer. So while normally fierce buttons as an anti-air push the furthest away, close stand roundhouse actually keeps him the closest. So what this means is that if you're going to get a parry on a dive kick or a jump in, that theoretically, stand roundhouse is going to give you the best options as your opponent lands. Unless you get a parry into a situation where they're going to fall into crouching medium kick into super. Because in a realistic sense, the only thing that you can consistently do is parry and then go into super, or you can parry and then go into sweep, depending on how the dive kick or the jump in actually wants to hit you, or it ends up hitting you, I should say. So I want to go over this situation, like using anti-airs and different decisions off of parry based on dive kicks, as an example. So Yun here can do neutral jump roundhouse dive kick, and that will hit me for +3. Or he can do neutral jump medium kick dive kick, and depending on how long he delays it, it will be between +3 and +6. Now, if Chun-Li were to take a step back, and I were to do the same dive kick, Yun's going to be +9. So this puts you in a situation where if you're Chun-Li and you walk back based on a jump, you have to be willing to make a decision, because even if you parry something that's so low, there's still an option that, or a chance, that because it's so plus, you can't punish it on parry. But for most of these decisions, or most of these situations, we're just simply going to be talking about a dive kick that sort of hits at plus, but can easily be parried. So the first situation we're going to look at is the dive kick that's plus, right? Now, this is a very common thing to happen sort of at this neutral space, because neutral jump fierce, neutral jump roundhouse, neutral jump MK are all viable choices for Yun, but his dive kicks are just as strong, because he still has access to that whiff dive kick throw, he still has access to the dive kick that is plus like this. So in this situation, if we get hit, it's bad, or if we block, it's bad, because if we try to throw, it's not going to work. Same thing if we try to do like stand roundhouse or something. It's just not going to work because he is at that plus frames, and anything that we try to do is just going to get hit. So let's talk about this situation. Because blocking here isn't the best situation, it gives Yun a guaranteed decision, unless you sort of guess high-low parry, depending on if they're going to do close standing medium punch, 1, 2, 3, crouch short short, etc. They might just Zempo you for that, or they might, just decide to throw you, in which case you'll have to late tech. But because they're plus, you can deal with this in a couple ways. You can opt to go for that parry, you can opt to attempt to anti-air them, or you can opt for different positional choices. So, as an example here, if I do crouching MK at this particular distance, he cannot punish me with 1, 2, 3 as he dive kicks. right? If he hits the dive kick, he has to confirm the dive kick hit a crouching opponent and then do stand light kick dash punch. They can't just sort of autopilot this decision from this spacing. Now, this also works if you walk back enough where far standing or close standing light punch doesn't really hit you. So in this situation, you don't have a lot to fear other than Yun actually trying to walk forward and throw you, or Yun doing a rejump. And he has to react to this dive kick becoming technically bad because it is so plus. While he does have options because he is so plus, the distance that he's pushed away from you is not the most ideal situation. Because at that point, the rock, paper, scissors then becomes, does Yun do crouching medium kick? Does he do walk up, delay crouching medium kick? Does he rejump? Or does he try to walk up and then like parry? Or just run away? If he tries for anything else, it's not really the best decision. Because in this situation, if you walk back and then you block, you know, if he goes for these things, you can just crouching medium kick his approach. If he doesn't, you know, do the walk buffer down parry thing. And if he does, then you can use stand roundhouse as a way to contest the throw, or a way to contest the crouching medium kick to make it whiff. Now, obviously, the 1-2-3 is going to be pre-programmed, so the far standing medium punch is going to come out no matter what and hit me. But in an actual match situation, that's not very likely. So now let's talk about anti-airs. The first thing we're going to talk about is back fierce, because back fierce can just raw hit a dive kick, depending on how it's done. And because there's multiple ways that this can have an outcome, you have to be prepared for all of them. If you do back fierce, Yun's going to go all the way across the screen, and you will need to, you know, chase to follow up, right? However, there are situations here where he's going to dive kick on you. Your attempt at back fierce is going to get hit by the dive kick, but Yun is negative. You can throw here. Yun has to react to this bad dive kick, and he has to commit to jump or throw. There's no other choice from the Yun player. So, in this situation, if I try to jab, I'm just going to get hit. Even though jab is very fast, it will either trade, or I'm going to get hit in a way where I can't really do anything, because if I try to throw, it will still be a frame trap. So if I try to do this too late, it will still be a frame trap dive kick. Right? So it's one of those things where you have to really be confident in your back fierces. However, you also have to be able to react to how the Yun actually manages to hit you. Because if he does get this sort of dive kick, which is very low, you starting to do your back fierce too late is going to give him that 1-2-3 as a combo off the dive kick. So there is some risk reward behind this sort of choice. So the next choice we have is standing medium punch, where either we're going to get hit or we're going to trade. Now, the trade is theoretically not the best thing in the world, because Yun is pushed all the way across the screen, or on the stage in some cases, and it will allow him to run away. But depending on his meter, this may or may not be a good choice, right? Because you don't want to give him access to that 1-2-3. Now, where this is better in some cases than back fierce is that you will intentionally get hit by the dive kick, and it will give you that guaranteed back throw. Now, you can also down jab in this situation, but you can't do stand roundhouse. So it's one of those things where your opponent has to be figuring out how you're going to defend, because if they throw, your down jab will win. They would have to option parry throw, in which case your throw would beat their option parry since they're put in a throw lockout. So now let's talk about Fierce Punch. As you can see here, depending on when I press it, I get hit at different heights on my head. So if I press it early enough, I can still throw him. But the most important part is that if I press it early enough, I'm able to act as he's landing. So Chun has access to SGGK, which most other characters do not in this situation. So she can opt to parry and still get a throw tech. So this is a situation that you'll see a lot, where the Yuns will do a dive kick and they'll think that they're still plus enough from hitting Chun-Li at a specific point on her body, but they're not, because they actually hit the limb of the Fierce Punch coming out. This gives Chun access to that SGGK, which lets her down parry or forward parry depending on what decision she thinks Yun is going to make, buffer her stand roundhouse throw, Kara throw, and then get the stand roundhouse on parry into a super. And even if you don't get the super, you're still in a situation where when you hit with close roundhouse, you're only -1, so it's not a bad situation to be in either. But if they don't go for an attack, you get the throw. You can still be hit in the opposite direction, obviously. Like if you try to do down parry and they do close standing medium punch, you're probably going to get hit. Or you might have a throw that's fast enough in some of those situations. But it is a more than viable option, and it's very scary for Yun to press buttons after you get this situation. Because if you do it low enough, you're not going to be able to throw as a reaction. You're only going to be able to block. So it's one of those risk-reward things where if you are pressing something at the correct timing during their jump, the worst thing that can happen is that you whiff it too early and then they come down on you, or you whiff it too late and then you're not in a great situation. But anything in the middle is exactly where you would want to be, and it gives you some of the best options after their dive kick itself. So the next thing that we have is sweep. Now, sweep can hit at all the timings that back fierce can, and it will also hit at timings that back fierce cannot. The most important thing about dealing with dive kicks is the consistency of your choices, and crouch roundhouse is a very consistent choice. However, if you do it too early, or if you do it too late, you're going to be in a bad situation. Because if you do it too late, you're going to end up giving Yun a combo. And if you do it too early, you also give him a combo. So it's one of those things where even if you get it like right in between, it's not like a great situation for Yun, but it's not a great situation for you either. So it's sort of like a net. But in general, like when doing your due diligence as far as varying your anti-airs, including stuff like sweep is very potent. Because you do get those, sweeps into knockdowns, and then you get your Oki. But it's usually best if you can walk back and make that decision to walk back sweep. If you are walking back as a jump, though, you can whiff punish with crouching MK. And if you do it just a little too early, you are in a position where you can block. So it's not the best thing in the world, and it's not the worst thing in the world as far as dealing with dive kicks at this sort of a distance. But it is something that exists. And like I said, if you walk back and you do crouching medium kick, Yun can't get his 1, 2, 3. But if you stay where you are and you try to crouching medium kick, obviously it's going to still hit you. So there is some variance and there is a little bit of risk here. But both of these choices have the same sort of odds as far as the risk reward, especially when you have meter, because if you're able to do this as a whiff punish, then you just turned the game around. If you're able to get sweep as a whiff punish, then you get a knockdown. And Oki is great because Yun doesn't have any invincible decisions other than attempting to EX up kicks, which is a risk because if Chun goes low, there's no way it's going to hit her. And the last thing that you can do is you can actually walk forward. Because if you walk forward, and you time your throw correctly, you will end up getting a throw. But if you mistime it, you'll end up getting 1, 2, 3, right? So it's one of those things that you have to be confident in. But, if you attempt to dash late, it's going to put you in a situation where it's not great either. You can dash under them if you call it out early enough, but it's not the most consistent thing. But if you do it just slightly later, and you get hit as you're trying to go under him, it'll still put you in that situation where you can get that throw. But getting this specific timing is much harder. So it's something that I wouldn't really, want you to go for. But if you're walking backwards and then you're walking forwards, or you're attempting to parry and holding forward, this is not a good situation. Because you're going to give him that frame trap dive kick from walking back and walking forward into it. So you sort of have to make that decision to, I tried to do an earlier dive kick, but I missed the parry. He still hit me, but he hits me high enough that I can throw. If you do it too late, you're either going to get the parry, or you're going to get hit, and you're going to get frame trapped. So it's one of those things where now that you know that you can get the parry with that walk forward attempt, what can you do with it? So now let's talk about if you actually get the parry. So if you parry and you walk forward, you can stand roundhouse, keep him close to you, and then you get sort of pseudo-Oki as he lands. You can also delay and hit him as he's landing with stand roundhouse. But this is only as good if you're able to do this sort of a super jump cancel consistently. Otherwise, you have to delay your crouching MK. If you're not comfortable with this, because if you delay it too much, then he's going to end up in a situation where he can block. But it's a lot easier to do a crouching MK that he falls into at a slightly delayed timing than just going like this. Because if you do it immediately, it's never going to work. So if you need an immediate decision, you can just stand roundhouse, or you can sweep to get your Oki. You might have to dash up as a follow-up if they do quick rise, but getting that sweep is still damage and a knockdown. Now, you can also fierce punch them, obviously. Depending on the situation, this might be good as far as pushing them more into the corner. So if we're at this sort of a distance and Yun dive kicks on me, putting him more towards the corner so that he has to re-jump out over me is a good situation to be in as far as Chun is concerned. It also gives good neutral jump dive kick spacing for Yun, but most things give Yun good neutral jump decisions. So it's kind of a moot point, I guess. The last thing that you can do is you can use back fierce, which gives the exact sort of thing that Fierce Punch does, right around the same distance. However, if you delay it a lot, you can get your Super Punish. But if you delay it too much, obviously they're going to be able to block. So you have to be very confident with this sort of back Fierce, unless you're looking to get that pushback that you would have gotten from Standing Heavy Punch as well. So what if Chun is doing like Goomba Stomp sort of dive kicks, where he's hitting you right in the head? Well, he's negative. So if he tries to do anything, you can just throw him. So he's forced to throw or neutral jump here. Now, if you do manage to, get a parry and you get a stand roundhouse here, you can get a left-right, where depending on how he's landing and when you press your stand roundhouse, you'll go left or you'll go right. And when punishing stuff like this, you have to delay a lot. Because, as you can see here, I have to delay extra to get the back Fierce to keep him grounded. And it's the same thing if you want to get stand roundhouse into super as they land as well. So even though this is the most damage, the most consistent thing is something like this. So when Chun does dive kicks like this, because they're negative and you can just throw them, you're not able to do stand roundhouse though, because stand roundhouse won't win unless he jumps. So this is why you would do SGGK again, because if he goes for crouch short or if he goes for 1-2-3, you get the down parry into the stand roundhouse, and if they don't, all you do is you whiff a throw, and then they get neutral jump dive kick again, which puts them in another negative situation. Because if Chun does dive kick, unless he does another dive kick that's light, which is a little bit easier to parry, then he's going to be at a range where it's quite easy to take advantage of him. So he'll have to either jump backwards, or he'll have to commit to that throw, in which case you get that throw tech from the SGGK, or you get the parry if they do the 1-2-3. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about back Fierce, because if we get back Fierced on a dive kick, right, we're going to be all the way across the stage. This means that we have the ability to run away and build meter, or we have the ability to reposition ourselves. Now, normally you'll actually want to reposition yourself rather than build meter, unless you're very close to Canadian. Now, the reason why this is because you want to maintain position where Chun-Li is forced to either move forward or stay at a range which makes it so that you have the ability to dive kick, be in range for far Fierce for a parry, and then you also have the ability to neutral jump and make a decision. So you can either do another dive kick, you can do empty jump parry, you can do empty jump with this at a height where it will still give you meter as you're landing, or you can use it as a way to jump in and get a dive kick that will be plus. This is also a way that when you end up getting hit, that you can do these dive kicks and get into a range where you can only be hit with that Fierce, and then you can jump in, empty jump throw, empty jump parry, etc. So it's a very deep situation after you get hit by this sort of an anti-air, because you're all the way across the stage, and there are a lot of options that are available to you. So let's talk about the choices that we have when Chun-Li is trying to anti-air with like back Fierce at this distance. So if she's consistently trying to back Fierce your dive kicks, just vary your timing. Because if you hit her in these situations, you're still +3 if you're using medium kick dive kick. Or you're +2. So you're still at advantage, and if they try to do anything, it's a risk, because they don't know how plus you are when you do this dive kick. Because if you delay it just a little bit more, so that it doesn't actually hit them after they've tried to anti-air you, or preemptively anti-air you, you end up being +9. So in these situations, you can just, do that walk-up throw. Or you can do crouching medium kick dash punch if you think that they're going to try to like walk back and like stand delay tech type thing, which is a strong option. They can also walk back and do stand roundhouse as a way to like go over your crouching MK. So there's a lot of like rock paper scissors in this situation. And because of that, when you get these sort of things, you can always re-jump. And it's not possible for Chun-Li to actually contest your re-jumps here, because you're +9, you're guaranteed that neutral jump. So you can whiff dive kick into throw, you can neutral jump fierce, you can neutral jump roundhouse, you can neutral jump medium kick, etc. And the same thing actually applies here, is like, if you're jumping at this distance and you're coming down, and you see that they've done a back fierce as like a preemptive measure for stopping your dive kick throw shenanigans or whatever, you can just delay and then do jump medium kick, or you can do delay jump fierce punch, where either it's going to hit them, or they're going to do back fierce and sort of walk back a little bit, in which case they can't really threaten a whole lot other than like stand fierce, so you can just sort of reposition as you wish, either with jump back or walk back or whatever. Obviously there's a little bit of nuance to this, but it's something you'll have to feel out over time based on the type of Chun-Li that you're playing against. So the most important way to me to deal with this is light kick, dive kick. Now as you'll see, the first one forced proximity guard, where the second one did not. So when you're delaying, if you delay a lot, and they try to do the back fierce, you will force proximity guard if they are trying to block after the back fierce, unless they're trying to parry after the back fierce, which is very risky. So by doing this, you are opening yourself up to that throw situation, where if they do parry, you win. And if they don't and they try to throw, then you just go back to neutral. However, by doing this at a delay timing, they have to transition from high block to low block, and they have to commit to throw or not. So at this spacing, they have to commit to the throw tech basically when you're walking forward. It's hard for Chun-Li to do crouching MK as a throw tech. So she has to commit to blocking high and then going low, and if she is blocking high and then going low, this dive kick will hit for a combo. So it's one of those things where it can be quite risky for Chun-Li to like autopilot their decisions and not sort of react and make decisions based off of what they see for the dive kick after their move whiffs. So we're going to talk about sweep from Chun. Obviously, it's a good anti-air. It can deal with dive kicks very well, and it can deal with dive kicks at a variety of timings. I did delay medium kick dive kick and instant roundhouse dive kick, or not instant, but like pseudo instant roundhouse dive kick, and it was able to beat both of them at this timing. The only thing that you can do is like immediate light kick dive kick, or not light kick, roundhouse dive kick at this sort of spacing, and if they try to sweep you at this sort of timing and they get hit out of the startup, you can stand light kick dash punch. Now, the same thing happens on whiff completely if you just neutral jump and they whiff it. So this is probably one of the more common situations where you either hit it on startup or you hit it on recovery if they're just sort of autopiloting their anti-air decisions with a sweep, because it does give them a knockdown. Because your sweep can deal with so many different timings, and if it's an actual player rather than just this computer doing it at the same time over and over again, their variance and how they're going to try to actually anti-air with this button is going to change. You have to know how to sort of deal with this. Now, if I'm doing neutral jump roundhouse at the correct timing, I'm not going to get anti-aired by this at very specific distances. Same thing with fierce punch, but you'll notice that I'm building meter. Now, why this is important is that you can actually whiff punish with dash punch. So this also applies to delay light kick dive kick, where you can just raw punish with dash punch if you are fast enough. Now, that's not ideal. You would rather get something like this. However, there are spacings where that light punch dash punch won't hit. And there's also spacings where crouching medium kick into medium punch dash punch isn't going to combo. So you have to know where you are spacing wise if these things are going to work. And if not, you just have to either dash punch or you have to walk up and then throw with like walk forward Kara throw. But it's important to note that like these sort of things very easily set up rejump into like another sort of strong dive kick. And also at this distance, if you try to jump in, there's lots of strong options that you have as well for like late jump attacks. And you can also do late light kick, dive kick as they're trying to sweep you, or late medium kick, dive kick as you're jumping forward to force a situation where it's rock, paper, scissors, right? And then you can do stuff like super jump cancel Zempo if your opponent has the tendency to go for the safe throw. So once you've established that you're willing to jump forward at this range and not just like sort of delay your dive kicks and change your timing on things, back fierce becomes more of an option for Chun, because if you back fierce, or if she back fierces, she can buff her lightning legs. So when we're able to jump in on Chun, and she's able to do back fierce lightning legs, it's very hard to actually deal with this, because most of your jump attacks will just lose to this. So the only thing that you can really do is jump air TC, because the air TC starts up faster than the lightning legs. So if the opponent starts to do like back fierce as a response to your jump forwards, you can start doing empty jump forward parry and then doing air target combo. Ta-da! As you can see, the lightning leg started up, but the light punch of the air TC still won. So we're going to talk about Fierce Punch. Now the reason why Chun-Li would use Fierce Punch is because you've already dealt with Sweep, and you've already dealt with back HP. Or you are being at distances like this, where you're neutral jumping, and she's either walking forward into space to do Fierce Punch, or you are already like filling the space where if you were to do something, she is going to be able to stop you on the way down. So if it's like delay dive kick, you're going to get hit. If you start up with a dive kick that hits as it starts up, you'll be able to actually get a combo, which is good. So like immediate dive kick, depending on how she does it, may be very profitable for you. But this is susceptible to being thrown. Or parried, I should say. And it's a risk if she has meter, because she can get, crouching medium kick into super or whatever. Even a back throw is not a great situation to be in. But because she's doing this specifically to beat these free empty jump normals, and she's doing it to sort of contest your empty jumps in general, because just empty jump crouch medium kick or empty jump into another jump or walk back or whatever, she can't just sort of stay where she is at all times. So in a lot of senses, contesting your jumps here is almost a requirement in some cases. Just how she wants to do it will vary. She can walk forward if you're empty jumping a lot and do back fierce. She can walk forward and sweep. But staying at the range where those other moves will nullify your dive kicks a little better, and still be able to use Fierce Punch is an important tool to have. So in this situation, you have to option parry before you do your normal as you're coming down, if you want to actually contest this choice. Now, depending on the distance and where you actually get the parry in the stand fierce, you may or may not be able to punish. Because, like, if I am just a scooch back, the standing light kick will whiff completely. But if I'm at this perfect distance, then it will hit. Now, if I'm back like this, and I do jump Fierce Punch at a timing that I know that will beat this sort of Fierce Punch timing, I can hit her and then dash punch as a punish. But it's very risky to do something like this, and you need to be really on top of your game to even make it a viable choice. So the last thing we need to talk about is crouching MK. Specifically, walk back crouching MK. So in neutral, and when Yuns are trying to do dive kicks and stuff, walk back crouching MK is good because as you can see, if I try to jump in and do like a late jump roundhouse or something, it will actually trip guard me if it's timed correctly. And it's the same thing where if I dive kick, it can trip guard the actual dive kick itself. So this is one of the reasons why it's used. The other reason why it's used is because it forces the Yun into a situation where he has to make the decision to either run, maintain position and try to build meter, in which case Chun-Li can then reposition and contest with Stand Fierce, or walk forward, crouch MK, or whatever it is that they want to do, or if they're content just building meter with crouching MK. This is a situation you'll see a lot when you watch Shirokuro or Michael Tan, or even Rikimaru play this matchup, where they're content at specific spacings because they know they have control, and they can just anti-air jump forwards with back fierce or stand fierce, or they can use crouching MK as they're jumping to potentially deal with other decisions that they can make. So the one downside to this sort of thing is that if the Yun is privy to what you're looking for, they can hit the startup or the recovery of your move and then get a combo. So there are situations where dive kicks will hit this and then they won't get basically anything for it. But there are also situations where they can get their combo. But the more important thing is that if they are jumping in, their medium attacks will hit for a longer time and have better hurt boxes to hit a crouching MK. So they can do jumping medium kick, they can do jumping medium punch, etc. And they can also just empty jump parry to cover the back fierce as well. So it forces this weird RPS, but it's technically in Chun's favor because she covers a lot more options at this distance. And she can also just build meter with her crouching MK, just like Yun can build meter with his crouching MP. But it's a mixture of building your meter and maintaining position so that you can still make those decisions to force the Yun to either back up, move forward, etc., just with your positioning and how you're using that crouching MK in neutral. It's scary to know that, the Chun-Li can be looking to walk back crouching MK as a whiff punish, or walk back crouching MK or crouch back or walk back sweep to deal with specific type of dive kicks in general. So then you have that RPS of, is the Yun going to jump forward and attack? Is the Yun going to jump forward early attack, late attack, etc., etc.? And if I early attack, the crouching MK goes completely under it. So crouching MK deals with a lot of these situations and is essentially a pseudo option select, as long as it's being used in an efficient manner based on your opponent's tendencies, or in a way specifically to garner reactions from your opponent that you can use to your advantage. The last thing you can do if you're MOV is whiff punish dive kicks with stand jab, crouch jab, super. So the next thing we need to talk about is how to interact with parries. So as an example, if Chun-Li is trying to whiff crouching MK and then gets a parry on your dive kick that's going to hit very low, she can't punish you with crouching MK super. And this is an important thing. So the other important thing is that as far as parrying dive kicks go, there are different timings at which you're going to parry. There's three main timings. There's timing 1, which is the earliest possible. There's timing 2, which hits right about where Chun's chest is, or where her bottom hand is. And then there is timing 3, which hits very, very, very low. Now, these three timings are important because if you are using jump forward dive kicks, it changes the timing at which you can actually attack her profitably. So depending on the distance and how far away you are from her, you can either jump and dive kick to hit her high, intentionally to give you a bad dive kick to force rock, paper, scissors. You can try to hit her at plus frames, or you can try to hit her at very plus frames, which is a little bit harder to be punished, like I just showed. An easier way to showcase this concept is by using regular jump-ins rather than actual dive kicks themselves. So, as Chun-Li, if I am crouching and I try to parry this jump attack from Yun, I end up walking under him because he's attacking at a timing at which he can only hit at maximum height. So if I stand, or if I parry block, I end up in a situation where I'm parrying too early and I'm getting hit and forced to block at like the highest timing that's possible. So this is why you'll see a lot of block, parry, block, right? And this is to cover a lot of different situations, but specifically here, if I were to try to parry this at the highest and earliest timing, but if I miss it, I'm forced to block, right? And this is a situation that Yun wants to have happen, right? He wants to be able to get that jump roundhouse at this timing because let's say that he jumps at you and he gets this timing with a jump heavy kick, right? He's still +4. So he can frame trap 1, 2, 3 off of this. So in these situations, it's very good for Yun to specifically look for variations in timing, but covering defensive options that actually hit everything is impossible. So that's why you have to realistically go and make decisions based off of what you think that your opponent's goals are at that particular time. So the further away that your opponent is, or in this case, where Yun might be looking to have that variation of like early jump medium kick, early jump roundhouse, etc., these spacings sort of lead to timing variance in their jumps, right? They're not going to always be doing that timing 1. So if you parry for timing 2 and then you block, well, okay, well that didn't work either. But, you know, if you're doing it almost as late as possible, then you're going to get the parry. And then if they empty jump, you'll get walk back, you know, throw or something, whatever you decide that you want to do. Or, you know, you can get that walk back crouching MK if you're already walking back when they're jumping. However, when you're walking back, you then have to decide if they're going to dive kick and if you want to commit to that forward parry or not, or if you want to try to anti-air. So this is where things get very muddy as far as how you want to approach things. However, because Chun-Li's crouch box is so low, this is also why crouching MK is very important, is because the early timings that your opponent can throw at you when they're jumping at you like this can't possibly hit you. So you only have to worry about timing 2 and timing 3. And if you're whiffing a button and you're moving backwards, he can only hit you very, very low. So it sort of option selects what is available for Yun. And this is another reason why Michael Tan or MOV or Shirokuro or whatever is going to go to these ranges where they can manipulate Yun's jump decision-making tree so that if they actually go for a jump attack or a jump dive kick or something, it becomes relatively easy to parry based on the distance. However, you do have to consider the timing variations, which, again, does add variance to the situation. So if you're crouching and then you do parry block crouch, either you're going to end up with the correct situation here where you block, or you're going to end up in this situation where you get hit. So while crouching is usually one of the better options, when Chun-Li gets hit crouching or blocks crouching, there's extra plus frames. So getting hit crouching is a very bad thing. So when defending, crouching usually isn't a good thing, obviously. So this is why parry block in general, especially for Chun-Li, is very important. But understanding that you can parry back fierce to cover dive kick timing and to cover jump attack timing is also important. Same thing for parry crouching MK. this is something where that timing of the jumping roundhouse was something that would hit it. However, if I were to do crouching roundhouse instead, then parry crouch roundhouse covers both mid dive kick timing, and it covers late jump in timing as well. So there are lots of ways that, because of Chun-Li's small hurt box, being able to force jumps to hit at specific timings allows her to sort of manipulate what is possible for Yun to actually hit her with, and can intercept potential dive kick threats or late jump in attempts. But she still has to worry about delayed jump medium attacks, because if she ends up crouching for trying to go for a crouch roundhouse or something, there is a chance that she's not going to get hit, like I showcased earlier. Or not going to hit you, I should say. Realistically, though, you're not always going to be in a situation where you can start crouching, right? You're going to be in neutral where you're walking back and forth. You're going to be in neutral where you're, dashing forward from max distance away, or whatever. So the Yun needs to take that into consideration when making his decisions, because while you can opt to parry and then attempt to anti-air, or you can opt to parry and then block, they can use their tools and their timing variants to force those dive kicks to be plus, or to force those jump-ins to hit at those varying timings if you're not crouching. So while in an ideal world Chun-Li would like to be using crouching MK as far away as possible, Yun is going to get in and he's going to force the spacing where you need to reposition, or you need to at least understand that you need to be standing in order to deal with more of his options, rather than just hoping that he's going to jump in and hit you. So now let's talk a little bit about double dive kicks and how parry guard or guard parry influences how these interact with your defense. So specifically as Chun-Li, your hurt box is very low on the bottom. So if Yun were to jump forward dive kick, do a bad dive kick, re-jump, and then do light kick dive kick, if you don't move forward at all, he will hit you in the shin and be able to combo with stand light kick dash punch, or a crouching MP stand light kick dash punch. This is good and bad, because if you walk backwards, depending on when you're holding backwards and when he does his dive kick, it'll either hit you low enough that you can parry block, right? Or if you don't give him time to re-jump before you start blocking again, and you just continue to hold back, then the actual dive kick is going to whiff. And if you walk back too much, the forward that you actually input for your parry guard will trigger the internal cooldown on you being able to throw. So you can't tech because you're not being able to go for SGGK in this situation. There's not enough time. So essentially you have to decide if you're going to defend by blocking and then teching when they land, or if you're going to commit to parry. And if you're going to commit to parry, walking backwards is a risk. Because when you get that walk back, yeah, sure, you can get something like this, but if you crouch instead, after a dive kick as an example, that you think that they're going to re-jump, it's not a great choice, right? But just standing there and parrying is a better choice. Because if you throw, it can still hit you after your throw. And it can also put you in situations like this, where you're in medium kick Kara throw range, but you're not in range for like anything else. And the range at which these dive kicks can hit, depending on how they're done and how you interact, matters a lot. Because, if you do stand fierce punch to like try to stop a jump back or something, or deal with some other decision that he might make to make a bad dive kick, it can be a viable option. But In these situations, you can also attempt to back fierce, and this might also set up a bad dive kick from Yun, guaranteed. It can whiff, or it can hit, depending on the situation. It's the same thing with stand roundhouse, where if you try to walk back and stand roundhouse, it's obviously not going to work. And if you try to stand roundhouse and he's jumping on top of you, it's not going to work. So the reason why stand fierce and back fierce will work at these distances at some points is because it pulls your hurt box backward or changes it so that it goes lower. So it's the same thing, like, you can crouching MK here, but it's not going to be a good choice. So you can also walk back sweep after a dive kick like this. Because if that dive kick is going to whiff, this sweep will actually cover it. But if they empty jump and then they parry on the way down, or they do another type of jump in, it can be a problem if you whiff your sweep. Because you have to time it to deal with that dive kick. It's not really a reaction to the dive kick, it's a preemptive choice. Now, because there's variance in timing of dive kicks, types of dive kicks, etc., these sort of things can cause extra problems. Because if you're trying to do the block parry block situation, here Yun does super jump, which forces him into a situation where he's going to get that whiff, which will potentially get that throw, depending on how quickly he lands. So, in situations like this, it's also risky to go for that exact block parry block. Because if you try to parry here, the super jump is going to cause him to hit you at a timing that the parry wouldn't have worked. And if you stand and you try to parry as late as possible, it will just whiff altogether. And you are in the same exact situation as if you were to block parry block. But just like the other dive kick, this can be swept. And this can be back fierced. But there are other things that Yun can do as well, which messes with these sort of decisions. So in this situation, we're going to block, and then we're going to parry block. Yun hits in the front. We parried for a 1-2-3, and then we started blocking again. If we were to throw, this exact same thing would have happened, where Yun crosses us up and hits us on the other side. He's then close enough to be able to react or option parry and then make a decision off of that. So if we were to try to, back fierce here, he's just going to go to the other side. Right? And if we were to try to use crouching roundhouse, there's a chance that he's just going to hit us. And that can actually combo off of a cross-up in some situations. So if you have to preemptively make these decisions as anti-airs to stop, like, neutral jump, double light kick, dive kick, or something, you open yourself up to these sort of things. And it's the same thing here, where if I try to, parry and then walk back, it can set up sort of frame trap dive kicks for him as well. Oops. But if you're walking back, you can get that secondary block parry block. But again, this goes at the risk of him changing his jump in timing and his dive kick type. So depending on how you're interacting with this situation, either you're holding back a lot or you're not. And the more that you're holding back, you open yourself up to that whiff dive kick shenanigans in front if you expect them to be crossing over like this. So there's a lot of mind games that can happen as far as what the decisions are that are going to come off of that initial jump. And this is why, after these bad dive kicks, a lot of Chun-Lis will just mash roundhouse or they'll mash jab as a way to reset. And depending on when you're doing your stand roundhouse, will depend on if he's hit grounded or not. So this is where that sort of rock, paper, scissors comes in after the first bad dive kick, is that theoretically your best choice is throw. But if you want to stop rejumps, then you have to mash roundhouse, essentially. Or jab, right? So if you see that and then you know that Yun's going to jump and you want to be greedy, you can try to sweep him, or you can try to back fierce. But as I showcased, if he jumps forward as opposed to neutral jumping the second time, or God forbid he jumps backwards, then it's an entirely different situation. And since there's so much variance just off of this one small instance, it's impossible to really go through every option available. It's just something you'll have to understand from both sides as time goes on and as you interact with different players with different habits. Because not every Yun uses this sort of cross-up dive kick shenanigans in the mid-screen. And not every Yun will go for rejumps. A lot of them will just opt for a triangle 1, 2, 3, or they'll opt for the throw because it's the safest decision. And then it's finding ways to deal with that. But in situations where Yun, is negative and he's trying to throw you, he still has to land, right? So it's going to end up in a situation where Yun can technically tech. But in these exact situations, stand roundhouse or jab will beat the throw attempt. So this is why off of a bad dive kick, the rock, paper, scissors, throw is still an option for Yun, but it's not a good one. And this is why bad dive kicks are in Chun's favor. Because stand roundhouse leads to super. Stand jab and stand roundhouse lead to resets if Yun is rejumping. And it's very difficult from these bad dive kicks to actually get a jump parry, or impossible in most situations. But again, if Yun is doing this, or dive kicks into your face, he can also neutral jump attack, and he can also neutral empty jump parry, and all that stuff, and land throw, etc., etc. So this really is a very deep situation that there are so many iterations based on your defensive habits and your opponent's offensive habits, or on Yun's point, your offensive habits versus how they interact with your defensive habits of your opponent. If they like to do that walk back late parry, add a super jump, throw them. If they like to do that walk back a lot, try to crouching MK or back fierce or something, well, you can always start to jump away and build meter. There's all sorts of ways that this situation can go. But, as Yun, he can also do things like delay tech or option select Zempo. So it does get even deeper. The one thing that I will leave this at is that the offensive/defensive option select that Yun has off of this situation is very difficult for Chun-Li to open up. Because if he were to do a bad dive kick and then you throw, he's going to get a tech. If you were to do this and then you stand roundhouse or you stand jab, he's going to get a block. And if you try to block as far as dealing with the next potential dive kick, he is just going to Zempo you. So the only thing that Chun-Li can do here is like hard commit to crouching light kick or hard commit to crouching MK. And this is like the deepest layer that this can go, because Yun is option selecting everything except for lows. It's the same thing as Chun being able to SGGK off of specific dive kicks. It forces Yun into a situation where he has to be doing a high attack where, lows might be the only thing that are worthwhile doing in most cases. Or low parryable moves, I should say. Now, the most important thing about that option select, though, is that the options that you have as ways to stop that option select lose to rejump. So, if they really want to make it a two-way guess for themselves, all they have to do is that one OS. That's not always going to be the optimal way to approach opening up your opponent, but it is a feasible and viable option that a Yun can do. The last thing that we really need to discuss as far as the mid-screen sort of air game goes is what about Chun actually jumping? Because she has quite a few options that are quite feasible. She has Jump Fierce Fierce. And Jump Fierce Fierce as like an air-to-air, right, pushes literally half the stage. Chun is all the way across the screen, but from the midpoint here, which is the box and Yun stage, you basically are forcing Yun into the corner when you hit with this. So when you do something like this and you dash up and you look for position, this is a good spot to be in. However, it can give Yun the neutral jump here, which gives him one of his best dive kick spacings. Well, this is like one of the most common air-to-airs. As you can see, there's variance to it. So like you can actually whiff the second hit if you mistime it, and you can whiff the first hit if you mistime it. So getting both hits and getting like the maximum pushback is something that is not always 100% consistent, depending on where you're hitting Yun in his jump arc and other factors. So when using this, you'll also see situations where some might use this, but others will use this. And the stomp in general is relatively strong against air-to-airs because if the opponent parries, you are then actionable again. Now, this is also important because if you are contesting their jumps with stuff like this, you can force these situations where you get resets and then you have a left-right off the dash or other shenanigans. But in general, even just doing this to get a hard not a hard knockdown, but a knockdown in general, can be very potent as far as like getting the situation that you want. And it's a great follow-up option. But, depending on the situation and how you hit, you might want this jump light kick off of this, because then you get left-right as well. And you can also follow up with jump heavy punch for an entire push into the corner from even a little bit further back. So you might be thinking to yourself, why would you do something like this as opposed to something like this? And the reason for that is because while this is a good option and it gives you technically better left-right sort of oki afterward, it's super inconsistent, especially if you're trying to safely or pseudo-safely jump in with a stomp rather than hard committing to like jump fierce fierce or whatever, right? And if you're going for the stomp, getting the roundhouse follow-up is inconsistent, especially against twins. Or jump roundhouse in general is inconsistent against twins. It does have its uses, though. So, while it's inconsistent, you want the consistency of that knockdown here from the down HP, because then you get your oki, right? But if you're using it in a different way and you're just sort of preemptively doing jump stomp to catch a jump or to sort of force a situation where if Yun is grounded, he has to decide if he wants to parry or not. And with this jump, you have jump roundhouse and you have jump down MK at different timings. But outside of these choices, you have air throw. But if you were to air throw, Yun can technically press a button and tech inside of the button to deal with this. And this is why air throw is one of the least used air-to-air choices against twins. Because if you're going to air and you're scared that they're going to parry or jump fierce, something that has 2 hits, you probably shouldn't be air-to-airing at all. The knockdown off of the throw is okay, but the positional advantage that you get off of something like this, or something like this, is much better than you might get off the throw, because forcing them into that corner, especially in mid-screen scenarios where you're slightly toward the corner itself, and you end up landing a lot closer, lets you more easily keep him in check and get better options as far as approaching him and making sure that he is in a bad situation and needs to sort of force his way out of the corner. Now, the scenario that I was talking about earlier, where, you might jump forward and not super jump, but jump forward down MK. Now, if you do this and Yun parries, your trajectory changes to the point where you're going back to the front. So, if you try to do a second stomp, it's not going to work. This means that your only choice is to go for jump HP or jump HK. Jump HK can hit a little bit deeper than jump HP can, but this is only because it's from a neutral jump scenario, where you are technically in forward jump animation, right? Or state, not animation, from the parried down MK. The other thing is, if the opponent parries here, you then get access to your parry again. Whereas if it hits, then you don't. So, let's see if I can find a way to showcase this. So, in these situations, we're able to have Yun parry, and then we land in front of him, right? So if we're landing in front of him, we can end up parrying and then getting jump HP into super, or we can end up parrying and getting jump roundhouse into super. But the jump roundhouse is a little bit finicky as far as where it will work from, as far as what you're parrying and how you're coming down. Right? So it still does work, but the jump HP is a little bit more consistent. Now, what happens if we actually go to the other side, meaning that Yun gets hit or Yun blocks? So we're going to use standing HP as the follow-up for Yun. But in these situations where we end up jumping and he ends up blocking, we can still attempt to do another stomp, which is not a good idea. But in these situations, when we're trying to follow up, we're going to be going in that direction and not facing Yun. So this means that in order to reface Yun, you actually have to get a parry. And if you hit Yun, or if the stomp is blocked, while you have access to parry, you are too far away to actually follow up. If this parry is successful, depending on, what you end up parrying. So if you parry like a far MK or something, then there's a potential that maybe the jump HP might work or something. But in general, if they're blocking and you get this second action, it's not really going to give you much. So when you're committing to these jumps, you really have to understand as Chun what options you have available to you. And also as the Yun player, you very much need to know that if you get hit while you're on the ground by this stomp, or if it gets blocked, she's always going to go over you, or almost always going to go over you, which technically puts you at an advantageous situation because she's going to, like, essentially put herself in the corner. So if she gets hit here, she only has like a little bit of space to walk back. And if she doesn't get hit and she gets to parry, it's still in a situation where Yun is at mid-screen and he has good jump spacing. So it's one of those things where, like, if I want to stand HP, it doesn't even work. I have to walk forward just to contest Yun's making a decision. So he can run away and build meter, he can neutral jump, he can jump forward, he can do whatever he wants. And sort of plan around the distance that I'm going to be away from him, even if I get that parry. So just like with block, you do get access to parry, but you don't really have access to much else. So whether you get hit or whether you block doesn't matter. The situation is essentially the same. Chun-Li is not going to continue to be able to do anything in your face. Right? So realistically, blocking or getting hit, even if it's crouching, by stomp is fine. Because at best, Chun's going to be able to hit you with this jump HP and get super. But in a realistic sense, it's a gamble if the parry's even going to happen, and when the Chun has to buffer the parry depending on how you want to interact. So if Chun-Li is actively trying to contest your air presence, and they are jumping at you and not like just YOLO jump fierce, and they're doing the stomp, it is imperative that you're blocking or that you are doing something else. Because if you parry here, Chun-Li has a long time to do jump roundhouse or jump fierce punch before you can successfully walk under her. The only option that you have here is to try to do a Dakai to get under her, or intentionally do a dash punch to get really far away. And if she has super, she can whiff punish this. So interacting off of that parry, you have to essentially, jump away or backdash. Because if you don't do these things, she has access to too many options from that neutral position right in front of you. But if you block or if you get hit, like I've already said, she goes behind you. Now, this opens up follow-ups at different timings. So you can do jump forward air target combo. You can also do like a delay jump fierce punch. And both of these things have different timings, right? You can also just run dash punch. Or you can commit to something like a Dakai. Or you can follow up and then go for crouching medium kick dash punch. Or a crouch short, or 1, 2, 3. Or as they're landing, they have to make that decision on what they're going to do because they're going to land into a pseudo trip guard because they're going to land into the button, right? They can still block as long as they don't press a second attack as they go over you, but they're still going to have to eat the situation of high-low throw. You also can intentionally just walk up and Zempo. So there's a lot of choices that you have. Standing MK, dash punch, and in certain situations, depending on where you are on the stage, like if you're here and she jumps at you, you're going to be in the corner, and the corner situation is the only other time where she gets the choice of landing in front of you, or she can jump off the wall. But in mid-screen scenarios, you're always going to be looking for her to be going to the other side, so that you can follow up as you see fit. Now, doing something like shoulder is very difficult to do. It is possible, and you can do it by tapping forward in the opposite direction, and then doing half circle back punch. And the best option for this is going to be light punch shoulder. Because if you have access to Ganejin, then you can activate off of this and then do up kicks, etc. So I've already explained that, jump heavy punch will push you to the corner if you get hit by it. And this is an important situation because when you're in neutral and you're doing whiff dive kicks, or you're doing like neutral jump, fierce punch, or roundhouse as you're landing to build meter, eventually Chun is going to have to either walk forward or look to contest you in the air. So she has to look for that walk up crouch MK, she has to look for the walk up stand fierce, or potentially get into range for back fierce, sweep, etc. But in situations where a lot of Chun-Lis are going to be looking to actually contest you in the air, they're going to be using this fierce. So this means that if you're neutral jumping, you have to be looking for the parry. And you also have to be double parrying, because if you're not, you're going to get hit by the second hit, and it's going to cause the exact same problem. So this is also something you need to worry about when jumping backwards, because a lot of times, Yuns will do jump back fierce punch as they're going down. Now, it's important to do it as a delay jumping backwards, because if you're doing it early, you'll either hit Chun at the startup of her jump HP, or it will just hit you out of your jump HP depending on when in your jump you're doing it. So this is why jumping backwards, you should be doing your jump HP sort of at the end rather than at the beginning against this particular character. But otherwise, you want to be doing jump back parry, and then you can do jump HP after that, or as you're hitting the ground, essentially, after that. In a realistic sense, this is one of the most dangerous tools that Chun has as far as dealing with those neutral jump situations, because if she's correct, then she gets the corner off of one good decision. And that's very rare for any one decision to essentially give you the corner. Yun's forward throw from mid-screen is another example of this against Chun, because from this little cart thing, you get that forward throw and then you get the dive kick, right? And now Chun is 100% in the corner. There's nothing that she can do about it. So like these one situations where you are now cornered because you decided to jump at a predictable timing, is extremely not easy to deal with, but it's a lot more comfortable to deal with these sort of decisions from Chun, as long as you're buffering your parries. And if you're trying to punish, you can't even do jab to interrupt the second hit. So you actually need both hits in order to hit her after the fact. So while neutral jumping at this sort of spacing is risky if you're not incorporating that parry, you really have to consider what Chun-Li is giving up by going for this. Because at this distancing, Chun-Li can walk up and then look to contest with Fierce Punch. But then she has to worry about how you're dive kicking and if you get in the rock, paper, scissors after that and all that stuff, right? But when she jumps at you, if you're option parrying correctly, will negate a lot of the choices, because delaying their attack is very risky. Because if they delay their attack, you're going to be out of range if you're jumping backwards, or you're going to be sort of at the end of your jump, in which case, if they're not doing it instantaneously, doing something like a light kick dive kick, or a medium kick dive kick, or a roundhouse dive kick, I should say, will get under them if done correctly. And if you're doing lights, this is when you'll actually get that sort of trip guard on her. So it can be risky from Chun depending on the distance, but usually you're setting up this particular distance by walking backwards. So either she's going to be walking forwards, or she's going to be looking for the jump and then jumping after you, right? But specifically as well, in a lot of neutral scenarios, you're going to be using like crouching MK as a way to contest. So you're either going to be doing like crouching MK and then jumping backwards to build meter, or you're going to be doing like crouching MK and then you're going to be parrying and then, buffering down parry, buffering forward parry to cover attempts to do the standing fierce or the crouching MK or whatever, depending on spacing, which we'll go over in the neutral video later. But um, in general, they're looking for you to be doing moves that will put you at distances where it makes sense for you to be jumping. Because even if you jump back and they whiff here, if you aren't able to hit them with your crouching medium kick, realistically you're not going to get a punish and they've just followed you for free at no risk. So this is something that is very strong for Chun-Li as a follow-up when they know that you're going to be jumping, and whether it's a neutral jump or a jump back, it can either be successful in hitting you on the way up, or it can force situations where Chun-Li is now in range to standing heavy punch me. Or we're forced into that neutral situation where I have to worry about, her walk-up crouching medium kick or whatever. So it's a little bit more useful than you might think, just because the jump option parry does beat it relatively consistently. The only other thing that you have to worry about as far as Chun making these decisions is jump back light kick. It's something that is done in neutral when you are abusing light kick dives to set up jump forwards, because in these situations, if you're jumping forward off of a dive kick that is good where crouching MK will connect, depending on the situation and the distancing, it will allow her to sort of get a free jump back normal. Because you following up and not dive kicking means that you're not going to get a punish. And if you do get a dive kick off of this sort of spacing, it's not really the point. The point is to stop you from doing these empty jump dives, to do the empty jump attacks to get away from you and be able to build meter and reestablish the space that she wants, while still semi-defending against jumps. It can also be done as a reaction to you jumping forward. So it's something that as the Yun player you need to be very cognizant of. It's not something that a majority of Chun players will opt to do. The only ones that I've seen use this consistently are Shirokuro, MOV, and Michael, but it is a choice that Chun-Li does have. As Yun, though, if you're just jumping all the time, it is something that you have to worry about. And it's why you'll see a lot of games where Yuns are just holding up, like the set of Nito versus Rikimaru, and Rikimaru is jumping a lot. You have to make the Chun-Li respect that you have a ground game in order to really open up your jumps. And while setting stuff up with your crouching MK does set up these perfect dive kicks, or these whiff dive kick throws or whatever, it also, like I said, does give away that you're going to be looking for those jumps. So if you are also, forward parrying into the standing HPs, walk up down parry, crouch MK, all of these things to sort of actually play neutral with Chun-Li, then your jumps will be much more successful. And her reasoning to jump will be a lot less the more variance that there is on the ground. The one thing that I do have to also touch on, actually, is that one of the main ways as Yun that you should be looking to deal with Chun-Li in neutral is looking for her crouching MK. And the reason for this is because crouching MK is negative, and Yun's jump is fast enough that if Chun-Li tries to do something, she will not be able to hit you. So this is a very common situation where Chun-Li will use crouching MK enough to force you to have to jump, and then look to follow up as an air-to-air. So this also means that if you're going to be jumping back after Chun-Li does her crouching MK, you need to be doing those buffer parries. Otherwise, you're just at risk for no reason at all. While talking about jumps, we've gone over a little bit of the sort of spacing that you want to be at. But we don't really talk about why you want to be at those spacings to begin with, at least in full detail. So we're going to start by using the max distance and what is good for both characters. So obviously Yun at this distance can very easily manipulate the stage and the spacing by using his dive kicks, his jump backs, his neutral jumps. He can build meter relatively safely, as Chun-Li doesn't have access to Fierce Punch. However, if she was to dash up and he maintains that same spacing and is whiffing crouching MP or something, then it's very easy for him to get hit for that sort of a decision if he's too greedy with his meter build. Now, from full screen for Chun-Li, you'll in the past see a lot of Chuns do something like this. Now, you'll see nowadays some Chuns like whiff once and then reposition, and then look to move forward. Because every inch that Chun-Li moves forward is an inch taken away from Yun in getting him to the corner. And this is where you'll start to see those players like Michael and Shirokuro and stuff use crouching MK as their way of building meter while maintaining that space to, again, deal with the jumps. Specifically set up the spacings to force Yun to make these decisions where either he's going to run away or he's going to attempt to come forward and contest you. Now, you don't want to freely give him the neutral jumps here, right? So getting into range slowly with these crouching MKs is very important because you want to set up the ability to do the jump forward fierce punch, or to do the jump forward light kick, or whatever, to contest these jumps as well that might happen, not just specifically looking to the ground. Now, while it's most common for, Chun-Li to be grounded at these positions, it's not usually great for her to just be whiffing tons and tons of buttons. This is why you'll see very specific cadences used from these top players, as far as they'll do a button, they'll look for the decision that Yun makes. They'll do a button, they'll look for the decision that Yun makes. It's the same thing on both sides, where they're not usually overcommitting to something unless their opponent has shown them that they're looking for them to act. So as an example, Yun could be building meter with crouching MP, but if Chun-Li is so far away and she's just worried about her own meter build, Yun doesn't have to worry about her doing stand fierce punch or contesting that meter build whatsoever, and it's fine. But as soon as Chun-Li starts to walk forward, you kind of have to stop. So that brings us to the next spacing, which is going to be where you can actually safely build meter as Yun, and what you need to look out for as far as setting up stand HP as Chun. So now as Chun, if we're all the way back here, obviously our fierce punch is not going to connect, right? But if we're in neutral here, you have basically 3/4 of the stage, or 3/4 of the screen, where, if Yun's under his name and Chun-Li is under hers, you can whiff punish this with standing HP. So this is why building meter is very inefficient in this matchup. If the Chun-Li is looking to maintain this sort of spacing, because this opens up her crouching MK meter build, and it also opens up her ability to walk forward and fierce punch you building meter. So it's why you'll often see Yuns do that thing where they'll do one crouching MP, and then they'll jump, or they'll walk back, they'll walk forward, unless Chun-Li, is dancing in between spacings and not really specifically looking to maximize that fierce punch. So another common tactic for Yun versus Chun is that when you're doing your meter build, as you can see, the Yun isn't building any meter from this attack. That's because he's using light punch instead of medium punch, and they have the same animation. So when you are looking to maintain this sort of spacing, it is possible to whiff punish this, but it is a lot faster. So getting the exact spacing to whiff punish this, as opposed to the extended time that the crouching MP is out, is a little bit more difficult. So if Yun is on point and he whiffs crouch jab, he can just dash punch your whiffed standing HP. And this is something that Kuroda does in his Yun videos, and it's something that you'll see Ushi and some other Yuns do ever so infrequently. But it is something that is important to use every once in a while, just to change your cadence of how fast your attacks are coming out, for one. But for two, also, if the Chun-Li is not on point with her spacing, being a little bit closer to be able to actually interact with that faster hurtbox, then you're going to end up getting the information that she's looking for that heavy punch to counter your meter build. And that's important to understand, that if she's going to be looking for that fierce punch at these sort of ranges, that's when shoulder opens up for Yun. So let's talk about, the far HP. If you whiff it at a range where you think that Yun is going to be doing crouching MPs, right? You're either going to straight up hit the startup like this, or if you whiff it, he's going to hit you like I just showed. Now, if you do it too late, he's going to hit you as well. Or it'll trade. Oops. There we go. And even on trade, Yun gets dash punch. So it gives him about another 12 meter or so. And giving him 50% meter, essentially, for a trade off of the standing heavy punch is not great. This is why in neutral a lot you'll see Chun's using the crouching medium kick more often, because this is, while good dealing with meter build, a lot more risky. Because crouching MK can hit the shoulder. But if you are too consistent with your spacing and you're just crouching MK, crouching MK, crouching MK, Yun's going to be able to whiff punish this as well. So this is why, at the highest level, there's like whiff, and then there's like an option parry forward in neutral to deal with the shoulder. And this also lets Chun-Li walk up and slowly sort of change the spacing to where Yun needs to either back up or needs to start jumping. And this is the range where standing heavy punch, is within range of Yun normally, rather than giving space to just build meter. Because as I've shown, if Chun-Li is doing things and she's going to end up getting whiff punished, or she's going to trade with something like back fierce as well, it's not the best situation to be in. While this can just raw beat it, just like crouching MK can raw beat it, it's a risky scenario to be in, especially if you're not able to just like buffer super behind it, at least as Chun-Li. So while it's good to be at these ranges where you can contest the meter build with standing HP, there are some risks that go behind it, as far as giving Yun the opportunity to counter poke with shoulder, and by giving him the ability to just run away, build meter, position as he wants. So now that we've talked about these far spacings, this is also something that Yun wants to do as far as opening up his dive kicks, is when these far spacings exist, he can use neutral jump light kick dive kick or forward jump light kick dive kick to actually get the spacings he would prefer to make his jumps better. And this is where, whiff punishing this with stand fierce punch is also strong. Or, back fierce is an anti-air for an over-ambitious dive kick or jump. Same thing with sweep, which we've already gone over in the anti-air section. But this sort of spacing is what sort of sets that up. It gives you the option to actually contest jumps. If you're too close, it's a little bit harder. Because while you can do like these back fierces and stuff like that, this is sort of the range where you are confined to using like max range crouching MK and like fierce punch. Because while standing medium punch in neutral against specific characters is strong, twins aren't necessarily those characters. Because if they're crouching, this will just go over them. And in some situations, that can just end up with you getting whiff punished. So once Chun-Li gets in, you really have to worry about, her getting into range of crouching MK and her getting range of like Nigopan, cat punch. Because while this is not all that dangerous, if Yun gets hit by it, he actually gets pushed back a decent amount. So if we start at 149 as an example, we're now at 197. So it pushes him back about 50 pixels, which is a decent amount. Whereas at point blank range, back fierce pushes him back about 100 pixels. So crouching MK at this range is actually not something that you can do unless you walk forward. So understanding like these micro ranges where things are going to work or not is important. And this is also like the range where Yun is looking to like neutral jump, right? Where once you get into this range after you've, made him either want to stay still, you have to worry about the varied dive kicks. You have to worry about the jump forward, the jump back, all these sort of things. And you also have to worry about whiffing crouching MK in a manner that will allow it to be punished. And this is where the cat and mouse game sort of begins in neutral, is this sort of spacing. Because Yun wants you to be committed to his sort of making you want to think that he wants to be grounded, where most of his most success comes from jumps. Because one of the things that's really important here is that if Chun-Li is doing Fierce Punch, then Yun can actually whiff punish this with crouching MK. So it's really weird because as Yun, he can do like crouching MK forward parry, and this will either hit the startup of your crouching MK, or it will potentially hit the startup of your standing Fierce Punch. So this sort of range is something where crouching MK is good for both characters, and it's also the range where Yun is looking to set up his dive kicks, because this is where he gets his best dive kicks, where his crouching MK is just barely not hitting. And this is the exact range where, empty jump throw, or empty jump dive throw and all this stuff is very successful. So being able to whiff this at ranges where it can still hit Chun-Li is very important in this neutral, because crouching MK goes under standing Fierce Punch, and Chun-Li actually has to walk forward to sort of whiff punish this, as opposed to the crouching MP, which extends sort of upward and outward rather than just straight outward. So it's a little tricky as far as dealing with this. So either Chun-Li has to walk up and then whiff punish this with her own crouching MK, or with the Fierce Punch by walking up, at risk of Yun being able to crouching MP and dash punch. So let's showcase some of this. So if I'm here and Chun-Li is doing whiff standing HP, I can counter poke this with crouching MK. And this will get me crouching MK dash punch, which gives me 26 meter. And it also, from mid-screen, where Chun-Li is true mid-screen, puts her in the corner if she quick rises. So this is not an ideal situation for her to be in. Now, if you are a god, you can do walk up stand light kick dash punch. And there are very few Yuns that I've seen do this, Dedun being one of them. And it is very demoralizing to be outspaced to the point where the Yun is doing walk up stand light kick dash punch to your whiff. But in these situations, if Yun is using crouching MK at a range where standing Fierce Punch can't hit, if he is in close, where he's essentially whiffing crouching MK, it's very hard for Chun-Li to whiff punish this, unless it's a very specific distance. Right? Because you're either hitting the startup of the move, or it's just barely coming out in time to hit you on recovery. So this is a weird situation, because at these ranges, Yun can freely, or not so freely, but at risk of Chun-Li doing crouching MK or walk-up crouching MK and giving him a jump at this distance, because this is exactly where he wants to be to dive kick in. So if Chun-Li has to worry about crouching MK at this distance, and she's looking to counter poke with her own crouching MK or standing fierce punch, then if Yun is whiffing this, and he's able to either counter poke the startup or whiff it and then get a forward parry, it's very difficult for Chun-Li to actually do much here. So this is why, you'll see players like KO and stuff in some of the videos that Nika KO has gone over. They'll use this as not only a measuring stick to make dive kicks and jumps strong, but they'll use it as a tool to goad Chun-Li to continue to move forward into a range where she can actually contest, which lets Yun sort of either jump away, backdash, or continue to try to make her do things by using his own crouching MK, in some scenarios standing MP or standing fierce punch, or even baiting the forward movement to shoulder them. Because if I whiff this, right, and she's looking to be greedy by whiffing fierce punch and then going for something else, I'm going to hit her on the startup of her next decision. Same thing with using like Dakai. You can also counter poke with far standing roundhouse. So like this is something that the Chun-Li needs to worry about, because if she's using crouching MK instead, the standing roundhouse can go over that at these ranges. So it's a really weird situation where it's one of the best situations and spacings for Chun-Li to be at as far as control goes, in getting out of Yun what she wants. But at the same time, it's one of Yun's best spacings because that's where the cat and mouse of am I going to stay grounded and actually play neutral, or am I going to jump sort of begins. So at this range, where you are, playing footsies with your crouching MK, Chun's crouching MK is just as strong. So, in these situations where you're using crouching MK to try to avoid that fierce punch, you can still get counterpoked, and especially if she has super, this isn't good. But if she hits you with this crouching MK in neutral, you're now at a range where nothing can hit you. She has to move forward in order to contest. So you essentially can free jump here, or you can jump away, backdash, walk back, build meter, etc. So being counterpoked by your crouching MK isn't necessarily all that big of an issue if Chun-Li is, looking to deal with you using your crouching MKs to avoid the standing fierce punch. Because obviously without that meter, you are not in danger after being hit. So the risk reward behind using this button at this range is very high for Yun when Chun-Li doesn't have that meter. But, while you can contest these choices with stuff like, stand roundhouse to hit the startup or whatever, you can also, hit the startup with shoulder at these distances as well. So it's something that just because Chun-Li is in range to contest your crouching MPs with her fierce punch or whatever doesn't really matter, because you control the space and you control the cadence of or the tempo of the game by your own use of your crouching MK. Because as long as she doesn't have meter to confirm, or if you're letting her confirm to use that meter, you're fine. But Chun-Li's goal in this matchup is to accrue damage over time, get that throw, and then go for Oki loops, essentially, until they get another confirm. Pretty much like every other character, right? But Chun-Li's Oki against Yun is very scary, because he doesn't really have a whole lot of choices. Especially when he's cornered, because, certain things become better for Chun when you are in the corner versus just in neutral. Certain tools that are not good in neutral become good in the corner. So it's a really weird, situation to be in. Because what's strong in mid-screen may not be strong in the corner. Now, this is also one of the reasons why when you see high-level play, Yuns are going to sit at this sort of range when Chun-Li is cornered, because they want to deal with the crouching MKs, and they want to deal with the standing fierce punches, but they also want neutral jumps priority, where they want to sort of goaltend Chun-Li and not give her the option to jump off the wall. But this is also, that risky spacing that if Chun-Li has meter and you mistime your crouching MK, you're going to get crouching MK supered. But even in those scenarios, depending on if you have the life lead or not, if Chun-Li hits the super, you're then mid-screen and she doesn't really get a whole lot off of it. Her best choice is to jump light kick into a sort of set play off of that. She doesn't get the single hit of the 2 hits from the Fierce Punches, the second hit I believe, into universal overhead stuff like she would in the corner. So positioning yourself in neutral when she's in the corner and not really being oppressive until you get the knockdown, confirming here, is extremely important. Because being able to crouching MK and confirm dash punch is an extremely important tool at this sort of a range. And the crouching MK just sort of peppering her with damage is great as far as accruing meter. But without that threat of the dash punch behind it, it can be a little lackluster. Outside of just setting up your dive kicks and your jumps and stuff like it normally would. So this is sort of the last distance that I want to talk about. And that is when you are not point blank, but you're not technically in carry throw range. Chun-Li has to walk forward in order to get her carry throw to be successful. Now, at this distance, she has stuff like crouching light kick, which is +3. And this is an incredibly important tool because it is a frame trap into crouching medium kick. Same thing for crouching light punch, is that it is also a frame trap into crouching medium kick. Both of these also technically frame trap into back fierce, depending on if you're trying to jump or press a button or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And this is why a lot of Chuns use all these tools, is because their basic rock, paper, scissors is, am I going to tick into a high, a low, both of these confirm into super, etc. But, Chun-Li can tick and then use far roundhouse. She can do all of these other things, like crouching light kick into standing fierce punch. This sets you up at the position where Yun might actually want to be at. But if Yun tries to deal with crouching light kick, walk forward carry throw, at this distance, with attempting to get away by jumping away, this will hit him. Because as long as Yun is set to jump back, then if we do this, Yun's going to get hit. And if we do this, Yun's not going to get hit. So the further away that we are, the back fierce isn't as good. But if we're up close, the back fierce is going to tag Yun as he's jumping away. However, he pushes him all the way across the stage. And it's the same thing with crouching with standing fierce, where while it is great damage and you do get a good meter off of it, right? It ends up at 60 meter as opposed to 40, and it only gets 2 from the crouching light kick. You're getting 18 meter from connecting with this fierce punch. So being able to use this as a way to condition your opponent at this sort of spacing is super important. Because, being able to frame trap off of your crouching light kick into the 2 different type of confirms is pretty potent. But you still need a way to get in. And this is one of Chun-Li's main tools in order to sort of safely make decisions after it, because you are +3. You have those frame traps and you can change what you're doing based on your opponent's decisions. So if they are option parrying low, you can delay your crouching medium kick to hit them. But if they jump away, that jump is going to be successful, right? So it's very much a mind game situation. But in these exact situations, this is sort of the spacing that you're going to get if you are playing Chun and you're walking forward after you get a throw mid-screen. Because as you're walking forward, you're walking right into this range as they're getting up. And yes, they can act as they're getting up, but if you attempt to dash here and you mess up, your timing on your dash, they can stand light kick you for free. So let's change this to light kick, where, you know, it's a really risky situation where if you want to like do dash up crouching MK as an example, that stand light kick is going to beat you. If you're trying to do dash up in anything other than block or throw or parry, that stand light kick just wins. So this is why the higher level you go in these situations, they're looking to force that exact spacing where you're just outside of counter throw range. Because this is where the fierce punch, the crouching medium kick, the forward roundhouse, the stand medium punch, all of these buttons are good. Same thing with back fierce, just in neutral. So having access to, you know, back fierce fireball super, and having access to crouching medium kick super from these ranges is super important to Chun's game. But this is also a range where Yun has access to good jumps. As I showcased in the anti-air stuff, at this sort of a distance, Yun can pretty easily set up dive kicks that will either whiff or will cause a plus frame on block. So Yun's jumping neutral here is very common, and having access to all of their tools makes it a very awkward situation. Because when you hit Yun with crouching MK, or if he blocks it, Chun-Li is negative, so he gets a free jump. So I've talked about this a couple times already, but in these neutral spacings where crouching MK is one of your best decisions, even if you don't have meter, you're basically conceding the fact that your opponent can jump, and you're looking for either the information that they're going to jump or the information that they're going to try to contest you or do something else. And this is another reason why crouching light kick is so strong at these distances, is because it covers a lot of the same distance that crouching medium kick does. Because, like, crouching medium kick doesn't hit from where I'm at on the door, right? Crouching light kick doesn't either. But as soon as I walk up to this little jug in the background, crouching light kick does work. And this also sets up, like, these other situations. So even if you're able to do, like, dash off of this throw into a crouching light kick, if Yun is frame perfect with his standing light kick, it's gonna trade. And it's not, like, the best situation, it's not the worst situation, but, you know, as Chun, you kind of have to just, like, dash down parry, dash block. But as you're forcing these situations off of this throw to get back into range, it's in Yun's favor to mix up between wake up highs, wake up lows, etc. So dashing too much is bad, right? I've already talked about that. But getting into these ranges where your crouching light kick and your crouching medium kick are very strong tools is sort of your bread and butter mid-screen. Even though you don't get a whole lot off of your sweeps, you know, getting a sweep and then getting the dash up, this forces that exact same spacing, and that dash up off of the sweep is safe. So getting to form a plan around what you can do off of that sweep just by adding that dash or whatever is pretty potent. Being able to know that you can just micro walk or walk a step into counter throw, or use that spacing to make them fear that walk up counter throw and hit them as they're trying to guard jump with your crouching MK or your back fierce or whatever. Point blank as Chun, stand roundhouse is negative. And although you can, like, tick into stand roundhouse from point blank, it may not be as strong of a situation as you might think. Because while it does perfectly set up counter throw, you are susceptible to being interacted with. So you can either option parry to deal with, like, a standing light kick, or they're just going to jump away. because if they're in this situation and they know that Kara throw is like one of the best options, and they know that crouching medium kick is a good option, if you're negative even on hit and you're trying to like go for this crouching medium kick, you're forced into a situation where you have to option parry first. So you have to use these tools in a different way. Because if you're trying to SGGK off of your own standing roundhouse, as an example, you're too far away. You're going to get far roundhouse. But at this close range, if you're using crouching MK, if Yun's jumping, he's going to get away for free. There's nothing that you can do about this. So, again, this is why the closer range that you are, Chun-Li's will use crouching light kick, crouching light punch, and stand roundhouse a bit more, is because although you're sort of similarly negative off of stand roundhouse and crouching MK, the standing roundhouse puts you at a distance where you don't necessarily have to worry about your opponent's throw, whereas point blank with crouching MK, as an example, you still need to worry about them doing like throw as you're trying to option parry or something. Because if you're not doing like this into SGGK, then you're susceptible to getting thrown during that parry lockout timing. So if you're at absolute point blank, being able to tick into stand roundhouse exists both off of crouching medium kick and crouching light kick, because even though crouching medium kick is negative, you'll still hit them out of their jump. And it's the same thing with close standing medium punch. However, if you're slightly back, far stand roundhouse won't work, far stand fierce won't work. So standing medium punch and standing roundhouse are sort of your only choices unless you're committing to like your opponent is going to continue to block. In which case, you know, after your crouching MK, you're pushed back to a situation where, you know, you still are in range for a roundhouse Kara throw. And this is the important thing, is that you can SGGK off of this spacing. And it's why it's still used so often, even though your opponent can technically jump. They can jump forward, they can neutral jump, they can jump back. But like I said, at this point blank range, you can still also jab to stop this as well. So you have three main options, but they are all high parryable. So that's where mind games also begin, is that either Yun's going to try to high parry, and then you're going to, you know, Kara throw him from your SGGK, or you're going to be in a situation where Yun gets to parry, and that's not going to end well for you, right? Even if he gets crouching medium punch, dash punch, and that's it, you're still giving him a lot for that. But this point blank range is very good for Chun-Li because of that 3-frame plus frame off of their lights. And these moves setting up spacings for the Kara throw and frame traps into high and low stuff is great. But just fishing for like crouching MK in this matchup, at least specifically, is going to end up just giving Yun the go-to to run away. Because if you do 2 crouching medium kicks and then you go for a fierce punch or any other button, right, then when he jumps away, it's going to not hit him. And from mid-range, standing medium punch may or may not work. And jab, sure as shit, isn't going to work because of the dinky hurt box. So being in that point blank range, being just slightly far enough away, like one step back, changes the entire dynamic of the usage of crouching MK. Because when you are using that step back, or you're just slightly not point blank range, and you don't have access to stand roundhouse efficiently off of like ticks and stuff, then your opponent does get that free jump if you're opting to use this button. And this is something you need to take advantage of as Yun, because it is one of her strongest buttons, especially if she's using or has meter. She's going to be fishing for that confirm, where frame trapping is a great way to actually confirm into things. A lot of Chun-Li's, even at the highest level, will just be using this button. While I've gone over using crouching MK as like a neutral tool, you have to understand like every spacing that all of your normals put you at. Because crouching MK here can put you out of range of Chun-Li's crouching MK on hit. So even if you're option parrying here, Chun-Li has to walk forward in order to hit you. So from max range, connecting with this, continuing to play footsies without like walk forward down parry or something can be risky unless you think they're going to walk forward to deal with your positioning. And this is also why jumping is important off of the crouching medium kick, is because if they're going to walk forward or walk backwards, you have different options off of the jump, right? Now, at these same sort of spacings, you know, you can technically try to fierce punch her. I wouldn't really suggest it all that often, but doing something like short is something that works and puts you at this range where crouching medium kick doesn't hit. So the only thing that you can do here is micro step forward crouching medium kick, or attempt to shoulder, or fierce punch. Two of these are high parryable. One of them is low parryable. So understanding that crouching leg kick is plus, this also gives you the ability to start running away. So when you're in close, understanding that this puts you at a range where Chun-Li can start to like Kara throw you just by walking forward a step is key to understanding how to deal with this situation. Now the problem with this is that Chun-Li is going to start doing crouching leg kick into crouching medium kick as a frame trap. And she's going to start using crouching leg kick into Kara throw. Now, dealing with this is very difficult, and at a very high level can be option selected against, which I will go over later. But in general, when you are playing neutral, far medium punch is a button that doesn't really get used all that often. But it has very niche uses. Specifically in situations where Chun-Li is hitting you with stand roundhouse. Because she's -2, or yeah, -1 or -2 off of this, right? So if she's trying to down parry SGGK because of stand leg kick or crouching leg kick or crouching medium kick as a way to interrupt her next decision, then you're going to end up in a situation where standing medium punch is the only thing that can hit her. But if she's crouching, then sorry, the medium punch fierce punch is what is going to whiff, right? So you can't even get all 3 hits. But this is just the medium punch alone, the far medium punch, is -2. So you have some wiggle room as far as still being able to jump away. She can't throw you. And from this distance, she's not going to be able to jab you. Crouching MK is not going to come out fast enough to actually stop your jump. The only thing that she can realistically do after being hit by this is like YOLO fiercing. And you're out of range of Kara throw. She has to walk forward to get into it. So if Chun-Li is doing like YOLO Fierce, stand light kick beats it. So there is a rock, paper, scissors off of this exact situation where crouching light kick and standing light kick will both beat this. And you can just option parry high. Because after this, you can down parry, and then you can high parry. Because the crouching MK is going to come out faster than the standing Fierce Punch, so you'll be able to cover technically both as a pseudo option select. Now, another thing is, if you hit this, you can hold up back, and you'll have plenty of time to actually parry this on the way back as you're trying to jump away. And the reason why this is important is because when Yun is dive kicking on Chun-Li, in situations where you have a bad dive kick, stand roundhouse is a very common thing that Chuns will do to stop rejumps. So if you're hit grounded, and you're hit at this point where Chun-Li is negative, even on hit or on block, you have the option to make that contest choice and make her think about if she's going to option parry high or low. She can't cover both. So this lets you sort of add layers to the mind games after this sort of move is used. And setting up these spacings off of crouching MK and stuff where these dive kicks can be strong, or, you know, in general, where you are setting up dive kicks to re-jump, then this is bound to come up a lot, where you end up getting stand roundhoused as the anti-air. Or the anti-re-jump, I should say. Now, when we do re-jump and we are hit by her, we're put at that same exact spacing, where she's just outside of character range. So you have to worry about a lot of different things at this spacing. And if she's plus, you don't have the opportunity to jump away. Whether she back fierces, crouching MK, etc., all of them will technically hit you. So you're sort of forced to take the rock, paper, scissors on if she's going to like walk forward throw, walk forward SGGK, if she's going to delay attack, instantaneously attack, etc. It's not a fun situation to be in. So you have to be very wary of this, and when you're doing these bad dive kicks, able to know when it's good to option parry yourself, or just blocking to force that situation where Chun-Li is negative on block, and then you can sort of contest with your own sort of walk forward throw, or your own standing medium punch, crouching light kick, stand light kick, etc., or just jump away. Dealing with these far fierces is also something that palm can be useful for, but it's not really used all that often. Sometimes you'll see it as a way to like force Chun into a space where she can dash, and relatively profitably, but she might get palmed for it. It's the same thing for if she wants to do walk forward fierce or something. It can be risky if you're, you know, building meter at these sort of distances with crouching MK or crouching MP, where you can pull your hurt box backward and then interact with that fierce punch. It's not a common situation, but it does occur. So another move that doesn't really get used all that much is far MK, and sweep is one of the reasons. When you quick rise here, Chun-Li still gets a dash up and then crouching medium kick back fierce as an option here. So using this move as opposed to using crouching MK is a risk. However, crouching MK, even on parry, will get swept. Just like it can get crouching MK supered, right? So this is something you have to be very cognizant of when trying to play footsies against Chun, is that a lot of the things that she can actually interact with on parry can be swept by her. And it's something that not enough Chuns do. But in a realistic sense, the sweep can give you some poor spacing, and if you don't chase, can just let Yun reposition how he wants to do. So it's one of those things where you're forced to make very specific decisions after the sweep, whereas you might have a little bit more leniency on your decisions if you're whiff punishing with something else. Or not whiff punishing, but parry punishing with something else. Honestly, though, if Chun-Li is walking into range, like walking in and out of range, then using your medium kick to sort of check that, to make sure that she's huddle walking, right? So that she can get the high parry, is pretty important. And also, like, using it as a tool to, like, keep her back and being able to mix in your crouching MK afterward, or to use this as a way to, like, okay, she is far enough away that I can roundhouse dive kick in and throw, is another tool that you can use it for. Because this, when it whiffs, sets up proper dive kicks that are as plus as can be. Same thing as using, crouching medium kick at these sort of ranges off of neutral jump. You get the same thing for forward jumps off of, whiffed far MK. So building meter with far MK like this isn't necessarily a good choice, because obviously this can be far fierce just like crouching MP can from Chun-Li, but it is something that you can use if the Chun-Li is walking back and forth a lot, just as a way to sort of keep them in check. Now, there is that risk of getting swept, but there's risks in pretty much everything that you do in this game. So another interesting part of Chun-Li's crouching medium kick is the interaction with her lights. Now, her crouching jab is active on frame 3, and her crouching short is active on frame 5. So short is usually something that is preferred off of these because it's not high-low parryable. However, jab is faster. So in these situations, Chun-Li is -2, stand light kick from Yun is active on frame 4. So if you're able to do this on frame 1, there's a possibility that you will actually just hit her. But in a lot of cases, you'll end up getting these traits, right? But if you do frame 1 crouching MP, which crouching MP from Yun is active on frame 5, you can just beat out the jab. It's incredibly risky to do this because crouching MP is high-low parryable. Now, the other problem with this is that she can SGGK after this crouching MK, because she's still close enough to do roundhouse carrot throw. So going for any sort of interrupt here is very risky, especially if it's stand light kick or crouching MP, because realistically, if they're just doing option parry carrot throw, then especially if they have meter and they can do stand roundhouse into super, you kind of end up getting screwed. But if they use light kick as opposed to light punch, there's going to be situations where you just win straight out more consistently because of the frame data. It all depends on what your opponent's tendencies are after they use close standing or close crouch medium kick. But the further you are away when you block this sort of thing, it becomes a lot harder to interact with, because crouching MP doesn't reach. And if you try to do crouching MK, either you're going to get a whiff punish if you're like frame perfect, or you're going to end up getting blocked, and that's not really a situation you want to be in. Although it is sort of like a max distance crouching MK, which can set up your dive kicks and stuff. But it's just not worth the risk of contesting here all the time. But the further you are away, the easier it is to just sort of run away or jump, like I've already talked about. Now, the other problem with this is that if they do like crouching MK, or if they do crouching MK, crouching light punch, there is a chance that you'll hit them crouching. So if you hit them crouching, then you get obviously a combo, and that's not good for Chun. So the next thing I want to talk about is Fierce Punch. Now, On hit, it is actually 0, which with from point blank range, how far it pushes you away, your crouching MK does not connect unless you micro step forward. So you being 0 and having to walk forward and do a move that has 7 frames before it's active can be a little bit of an ask. But the other problem is that if you're doing Fierce Punch, you know, sure, it might deal with Yun if he does like crouching MP or something, but realistically, like pressing multiple buttons here doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So this is one of those things that it's a forced reposition. And from Yun or Chun's perspective, it forces neutral once more. It's usually useful for Chun-Li, as it pushes your opponent toward the corner. So if you're doing something like this sort of string sort of forces Yun to, go towards the corner because of the pushback, right? But he is 0 on hit. And if Fierce Punch on block is -2, he gets that guaranteed jump just like he would off of you being 0. And you're also too far away to actually do anything. So it makes the situation very weird. And in order for Chun-Li to, contest things from far HP, she has to walk forward a lot in order to get the crouching MK to work. So positionally, this sort of sets up Yun at a spacing where jump forward dive kick will whiff for throw, neutral jump dive kick will hit at Chun's foot, and it sort of just gives that neutral jump spacing where you'll be walking forward and trying to hit Yun with standing heavy punch or something like that. Now, while you can do the hard commit double jump HP or stomp or whatever, in a realistic sense, something like this is obviously going to be a risk, because the further you are away, the easier it will be for Yun's dive kick to get under you if you just commit to something like this. So from this situation where Chun-Li is able to do Fierce Punch, depending on where she is, where you get hit, being able to, as Yun, shoulder afterward is kind of a risk for Chun, because if she tries to Fierce Punch, walk forward Fierce Punch, or anything of that nature, or even Fierce Punch and then walk back and try to build meter with crouching MK, you can hit the startup or you can hit the recovery of the crouching MK. It's not the best decision because she is far enough away that she can react to the shoulder, but in most realistic senses, Chun-Li is going to be in a situation where when she does Fierce Punch and you block it, you're far enough away that you get this dive kick. You're far enough away that you will get this dive kick with jump forward, whiff. You're far enough away that you can get jump-ins of different types. So there's a lot of decisions that can be made here where if she does Fierce Punch and you hold up, she can't really Fierce Punch unless you're on the way down. So the situation is very much in Yun's favor, but that's only because he can decide how he wants to jump rather than anything else. Now, the only position that this sort of changes in is when you're in the corner, because there are situations where you'll be trying to get out of the corner, and then Chun-Li will do her Fierce Punch, which puts her right under the timer and is at perfect positioning to actually goaltend and keep you in the corner, and sort of use her back fierce, stand fierce, crouching MK, all these tools to make it hard for you to leave. And she doesn't necessarily need to be in your face to control you. So Fierce Punch becomes a little bit better the closer that she is to the corner, just because of the control that it gives her as far as spatial control, since her moves do occupy a lot of space compared to Yun. Yun does have stuff like Dekai, which is very risky, because on block Chun-Li can super this. So, in a sense, in neutral, dealing with standing heavy punch is a lot easier because you have the ability to whiff punish it, you have the ability to interact with it by, even if it hits you, you are not in a bad situation as Yun. It's sort of a neutral situation. And that's a little bit difficult for both players because while it's good for Chun-Li to get the damage and get the meter, um, depending on where on the stage it is, Yun has a lot of options as far as follow-ups. And it's a lot of mind games between the two players as to how the interaction actually goes. Yun can just raw backdash, he can jump back, jump forward, neutral jump, um, walk forward and contest his Chun-Li's decisions with his own crouching MK. There's all sorts of things that could happen, right? And because there's so many variables, it makes this particular situation a little unpredictable. But because Yun sort of controls more of the variables than Chun-Li does, it is in his favor. So I've gone over a couple of these, but I just want to reiterate this point, that even though crouching light kick and crouching light punch are +3, and they can set up their frame traps into crouching MK and back HP, as well as, frame traps into close stand roundhouse, depending on distance, and using standing MP as that tool to force the proximity guard. Now, when we actually are frame trapped by our opponent, the second decision that they make allows us to act. Because every choice that she has, as long as it is blocked, is negative. So, in the mid-screen situation, if she does back fierce here, then we're able to block the back fierce and then jump away. Same thing for crouching MK. We can either jump away, neutral jump, etc. She can't interact with us. If she tries to do sweep as well, she's -7, and you can technically punish this in some situations, but in a realistic sense, at max distance, this isn't possible. So even after sweeps, you are going to have enough advantage after the fact to jump out or move as you see fit. So walking after a crouching MK, like walking backwards, depending on the distance that she hits you with the crouching MK, like if she does max distance crouching light kick, crouching MK as her frame trap, then you can technically walk backwards or backdash and be fine. But if she starts it here, she can still continue to pressure and hit your walk back if that's what you decide to do. So it's something that, depending on where she is when she starts her decisions, can heavily influence like what your best choices are. Now, in situations where she's using like fierce punch and stuff, she's still -2, but you're pushed all the way away. She cannot interact again unless you just try to build meter like a dumbass in her face where she can fierce it, right? So in these situations where she's using all of her different tools that are not her oppressive lights, which, don't get me wrong, having frame traps that disallow you from guard jumping after her light attacks is pretty devastating, especially in corner situations. But in the situations where she is at sort of max range, there's a lot less that she can do after she is committed to her second choice. Because it puts Yun right in the positions that he wants to be at if she uses any of her, like, fierce punch roundhouse moves. And depending on the distance, the crouching MK will allow you to either jump, backdash, or interact, right? You can microstep forward, option parry. You can do a lot of different things to sort of deal with what Chun-Li might want to be doing after this crouching MK. And it's the exact same thing off of like back fierce, is that like she has to walk forward and fierce punch just to be able to connect with you. So when Chun-Li is looking to do frame traps, she has to accept that if she's doing specific things, that it may force neutral again. And depending on the position on the stage, it may or may not be a good thing. So like if Chun-Li is here and she's going for a frame trap, the crouching light kick, crouching medium kick doesn't actually push Yun that far back, right? But if she wants to like force him to the corner, she can do stuff like this to cover a little bit more space. As Yun now doesn't have the ability to really jump back here, because if he were to do so, he will corner himself. Sometimes cornering yourself isn't a bad choice, though. So it is something you do have to understand is a choice that the Yun can make. It's something that I've seen Issei and Yakun do quite a bit, where they will intentionally corner themselves to force Chun-Li to move forward so that they can get out of the situation again, or force a dive kick that gives them a better situation. But in these situations, like after the first interaction, you know, they can do walk up back fierce or something, like walk up down parry back fierce, or walk up forward parry back fierce, depending on if they're using how to walk or not, and use their fierce buttons, either fierce punch or back fierce or whatever, as a means of covering distance and as a means to slowly push you to the corner. So while the frame traps are very good in Yun's favor after the fact because there's a lot of ways that he can interact, it's still very strong for Chun-Li to be setting up neutral and get back to the position where she can interact with jumps profitably if she is looking to use those anti-airs or properly can read the jumps to allow for parries to be useful. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the corner and how badly it sucks. So in situations that would normally occur where a move is bad, it's not as bad when Chun has advantage in the corner. So as an example of this, she can't do crouching MK stand fierce, right? But she can do crouching LK stand fierce, and this will almost always position her at the perfect spacing for goaltending. And why this is important is because, well, she gets access to trying to whiff punish your crouching MKs, to dealing with your jumps with this, to dealing with your jumps with this, stopping jumps with neutral jump roundhouse, back fiercing dive kicks, and all sorts of other shenanigans at this spacing. So when Chun-Li is goaltending Yun, it's not a fun situation, because even if she hits with fierce and then walks up fierce, she can still walk into this range relatively consistently. And trying to act while she's pushed this far away can be a risk, but it's a risk that Yun must take in many situations. Now, at this spacing, Yun can neutral jump dive kick and hit her as low as possible. So Chun-Li also needs to be wary about Yun's neutral jumps if she's not looking to contest with like walk forward fierce, or is not comfortable walking forward and pressing a button to cause a bad dive kick. So when in the corner and Chun-Li is at this distance, you obviously have to fear Kara throw, right? But crouching MK at this distance is very strong, because if you try to get out, or if you try to jump forward, even from like max distance, this stops forward jumps. Neutral jumps from max distance, it doesn't matter, right? But from this far away, she can contest with stand fierce, she can contest with jump forward, she can contest with a lot of different decisions. She can contest by walk back crouch MK to try to whiff punish a dive kick attempt. So while it does set up good dive kicks for you, there is a risk to doing so. Now, the other important part of crouching MK in the corner is that when Chun-Li is doing crouching MK, up close she has a lot more options to keep you in check if you're just trying to jump out, or just jump in general. So you can just stand roundhouse as a pseudo frame trap. You can also do the same thing with medium punch, but stuff like back fierce and fierce punch don't work off of this, right? But all of your faster buttons do. And you get these resets where you're stupidly advantaged. And it's technically a TDK because you've only hit them once. And also, Yun doesn't have any good invulnerable moves anyway, so he just sort of has to eat the mix-up after getting reset in these situations, especially this close. So this isn't the situation Yun wants to be in, because, you know, if you're hitting Yun in this situation, you're at that spacing where all it takes is that one step forward to get that Kara throw. Or you can do walk forward crouching MK, which also sets up walk forward Kara throw. Or sets up standing MP, which whiffs over Yun. And this is the next most important part, is doing standing MP as a way to force Yun to actually proximity guard. Okay, so I'm going to showcase a situation that Nuki put me in, and why it's so strong. Now, Far MP is one of Chun's most underrated normals as far as contesting and containing her opponents, at least in the US, in my opinion. Now, the reason why it's so strong is because against smaller characters it forces proximity guard, like this. Now, you'll see here, if I try to duck and then super jump out, it hits me out of the startup of my super jump. So this means that I have to react to Chun-Li actually doing her standing MP with a forward jump. And if I don't react with a forward jump, I'm not going to get out. And if I do get out, I am right next to her. So she has priority as to what she wants to do as I'm going over her. So, you know, if I jump over and I try to dive kick, I will get fierce punched and put into the middle of the screen. And while it is a favorable position technically for Yun to do that, it is a risk. Because you have to commit to that dive kick, like, immediately. Otherwise, if you're jumping out, you have to parry in the opposite direction, and Chun can either do back fierce lightning legs, or she can do delay, walk back, crouch MK, or stand roundhouse, or whatever. So, like, you jumping over and being forced to parry is a bad situation, because if you land and Chun-Li back throws you back into the corner, then, well, you're probably going to be eating a very similar situation, or you're going to be dealing with the Oki again. So the other problem is that if you react very slowly to the standing medium punch actually coming out, that going from down back to up back to down back, like trying to deal with Kara throw as a guard jump of sorts, you're going to end up getting hit by the crouching MK trying to avoid the Kara throw, which can work from these positions. She just has to take that step forward. So it is a very dangerous position to be in because of how many options that Chun-Li has. So she doesn't have to do just standing MP into crouching MK, right? She still has other choices that she can go for as well. But this is the most dangerous situation because if she has super, then if you try to super jump out, which is the safest way to get out of the corner against Chun-Li, then you get hit. If you don't react in time and you try to guard jump to avoid the Kara throw or the walk-up throw or whatever, then if she does crouching MK, you get hit. So, talking to Sho about it, the only thing that you can do is that if you don't react fast enough, is you can contest with stand light kick, YOLO dash punch. And that's kind of the only thing that you can do. Because you can attempt to throw, but you have to be immediate and catch the startup of the crouching MK. And reacting that quickly, consistently, is very not a thing. Specifically because she can also do this from ranges where you are not in range of walk throw. So she can be a little bit further back than she is in this instance and have it work. Because that standing MP can whiff at the distance that she's at here, as an example, and it will still force proximity guard. So if I am at Kara throw range, I can still throw Yun. So if I do something like crouch light kick and then I get stand medium punch, you know, I get SGGK. And I get access to this. And I also get access to, like, stand jab. Trying to stop the jump. It's a very deep situation that, like, Yun just does not have priority in and has to sort of guess his way out. Because even if Chun-Li does crouching MK and you parry it, you sort of have to know that you need to do standing light kick in case she leaks super. Which, at the highest level, hopefully they're not leaking super, but it is something that you need to be very wary of as far as how you're punishing it. Or delaying your punish so that it's after the window at which she can cancel into super. So this is also a reason why Chun-Li's will do stuff like stand MP, stand light punch, is because they'll both force proximity guard and then they can just throw you. So, and if you try to get out and they jab, it's not going to be consistent as far as getting out of the corner if the standing medium punch is already whiffed over you. You can, if you're lucky, get out. Or you can jump parry, right? But in a realistic sense, this isn't going to happen. You can, again, standing light into YOLO dash punch as like a whiff punish. But again, it is something you have to commit to, and if they are doing SGGK, then you can kind of get screwed. Another important thing to understand is that crouching light kick, being low parryable only, is very, very dangerous because it sets up so many different things. It sets up frame trap into crouching MK in the corner. It sets up back HP, which it turns into a TDK. And after you've hit them out of the air, you know, you have stand fierce. You have walk forward back fierce. You have walk forward crouch MK. You have all these different tools. And you can specifically frame trap into standing MP. And if they're trying to jump after this, and they're not blocking long enough for the standing MP to force proximity guard, which it would in this situation, then they're just back in the corner. So the other thing about this is that at point blank range, you're still in roundhouse Kara throw range. The other thing is that if you throw, you are able to walk back and then still meaty with crouching light kick. This is one of the things that MOV was most known for, was his set play off of throw, where you delay your walk back and then you can do stand roundhouse, back fierce, crouching MK, crouching LK, stand MP. All of these can be done at meaty timing or at timings to beat guard jump. So it's very dangerous for Yun because he's literally guessing the entire time. Chun is not a character that you can consistently do your normal sort of guard jumps against, because if you do, you're just going to end up in a bad situation in most cases. So that's why against Chun a lot of Yuns will use parry jump instead, where you down parry or you forward parry and then you just try to super jump out. Because eventually Chun-Li is going to start to have to use delays. If she's always meeting you, even though she has the high-low, eventually you're going to guess right, and you're going to get your dash punch into set play, and she has to hold that. But until that point, all the offense that she gets off of her throw is very important. Now, the other thing is that crouching light kick and crouching light punch set up frame trap sweep. And sweep hits from very far away by comparison. So like you can be under the winds and have it still hit. So like you can use this into sweep as like another layer of mind games as well. Because if they're just sort of like sitting there waiting for you to try to carry throw or something and like waiting to like tech, then you're good. You're gonna end up hitting their delay crouch tech or whatever it is they're trying to do to deal with your throw, walk back, walk forward throw, or whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're using carry throw or not. But that's the other thing, is that like you can really break down the opponent's defenses when they are on Okuzeme after a throw in the corner or after a sweep in the corner, because all of your options are available to you at ranges where Yun cannot throw you. So you are 100% safe, really, as Chun, unless the Yun YOLOs sort of his wake-up options. And it's something that, twin players have to do against Chun-Li, otherwise they're just going to stay in a pseudo-vortex sort of forever. While I have gone over a little bit, all the tools that Chun-Li has that pushes her away forces a weird situation, because if Yun is jumping here, right, she can walk forward and contest. She has to worry about him coming down with jump HP, jump MK, jump roundhouse, empty jump parry, and she has to worry about dive kicks. She also has to worry about him trying to jump forward after something like this, in which case if he does that, she needs to call it out with an air-to-air, like this, or she needs to back up even more to stop the actual jump itself, so that she can do something like back fierce into legs. But in these situations, when you get a throw or something, you can walk back, walk forward into stand fierce, or you can give this spacing where you're not doing this sort of walk back crouch MK that will hit as the opponent is like starting to jump, right? Or you're not going to be like walk back, stand back HP that'll hit at like guard jump timing. So if there's any sort of variance here, like even though Chun-Li is plus 17, she still has to walk up in order to deal with things, unless she wants to just like YOLO fierce after that back fierce from her, right? So in these situations, Yun is looking for Chun-Li to get to about this spacing, where crouching MK is just not able to hit, to super jump over her. So as an example, if like Chun-Li sets up this spacing, well, if I super jump over her and I don't parry at the correct timing, obviously I'm going to get smacked in the face. But if I do it at the correct timing, I'll still be in the air, and the only timing that she can really hit me is with the standing fierce punch, unless she just commits to walking forward as I super jump to go for the crouching MK sort of variation. Now, in order to deal with this, you can super jump over and then do a dive kick. And what this will do is force Chun-Li to only be able to hit you with fierce punch. And as you can see here, I'm all the way across the stage, or all the way across the screen. So I now get to decide how I want to approach. And it's my turn to sort of dictate the pace. But getting into that situation where Chun-Li is far enough away, where you can sort of look to jump out, it's usually covered by a parry. So it's usually like forward parry or down parry super jump out, just to cover the options. Because if Chun-Li is doing something like this, where she's doing like crouching light kick as like a frame trap, and then doing things to keep you here, she has to walk in order to hit you. So unless she's content just looking for you to jump out, dealing with your dive kicks, etc. If she wants to pressure and she wants to get those confirmed and all that stuff, she has to move forward, which is what you need to be looking for when you're trying to get out of the corner. Because at this sort of spacing, this is also where, Michael or Shirokuro or stuff will do stuff like jump back light kick to stop those sort of super jump attempts and still maintain that Yun is mostly in the corner as he gets hit by that jump light kick. So it's a very frustrating and nuanced situation where they're both sort of looking to take advantage of the crouching MK distance based on the fact that the further away that you are, the easier it is for Yun to vary his dive kicks off of this neutral jump. And also he gets empty neutral jump sort of for free because if he parries on the way up, he can still parry on the way down. So it deals with the early jump fierce, and it also deals with the, standing fierce as you're coming down and stuff like that. But there's still all sorts of risks no matter what you're doing on both sides of the coin. Because eventually, Yun is going to block a fierce punch, or he's going to block a crouching medium kick, or get hit by a crouching medium kick. Jesus Christ, my frame traps suck. Where you are at that distance where fierce punch might hit, but that's kind of it, right? You have to walk forward to get those crouching MKs to work. And it's the same thing that I've showcased before, where Yun sort of gets this same conditioning where they're looking to control you with this and where it puts them. And Chun-Li's no different. But she just has so many more options that are safe because of how good her lights are on block, where they're +3. So in these situations, she can stop those attempts at guard jumps after her light attempts, right? But there is one way that Yun can sort of deal with this, and it is very advanced, where he can deal with the frame traps, stopping the jumps, and he can deal with the like crouching light kick into Kara throw, which is a very common thing that Chun-Li's will do. While Chun-Li's throw in the corner is very oppressive, mid-screen it is very matchup defining. And I've already gone over it a little bit, talking about how standing light kick can beat a lot of her options. However, if Chun-Li is doing things correctly, that's not really the case. So here we're going to talk about the baseline rock, paper, scissors, which is dash up crouching light kick or dash up Kara throw. Now the reason why this is important is because crouching light kick doesn't actually hit meaty. It hits you like a frame late. So it will still hit the startup of a jump. However, if you try to guard jump, you have to delay your guard jump in order to actually block it. And the slight delay in guard jump changes this slightly, because if you're going to guard jump, then you're forced into this situation where Chun-Li is in perfect range to micro-step Kara throw, and she's also in perfect range to still frame trap you. So you're either going to be holding up in order to get out of this situation, as in dodge the throw, or you're going to be blocking for an extensive period most of the time, because you don't want to get frame trapped. So if you're blocking, you have to, late tech or whatever, in which case her doing walk up, down parry, and then something like crouching MK is also something you have to worry about. So the way that the mind games evolve from this situation is kind of annoying, because if we want to stand light kick, if she times her crouching light kick properly, our standing light kick, if done even a frame late, is not going to hit her. Whereas if we're frame perfect, we will end up in a situation where we'll trade. Now, she's still in range to do crouching MK, and she's still in range to do other things. We're not in range to jump over her without a super jump, so we can either only neutral jump or back jump in most cases. And back jumping and putting ourselves more towards the corner may or may not be what we want to do, especially if she's going to be dashing forward to follow our jump back. Something that, a player like Rikimaru is known for. So when going over these situations, you have to like think about what options Chun-Li has and all that stuff. But because the crouching light kick is the most important aspect of this, down parry from twins becomes very good as well. However, down parry also loses to dash throw because you can't even tech in that situation. So there's a lot of like gray area on how you should actually defend against this. The safest way is just to block and then delay tech so that you can tech the throw. However, in a practical sense, if you do the same thing all the time, obviously, it's just going to get taken advantage of. So the other important thing about this is that if we're not quite in the corner fully, two throws basically corners us. So Chun-Li now has complete control of the spacing that she wants to be in, and it's obviously not a good thing to have happen. So if you're in situations where you are any closer to the corner, or out of the corner, I should say, towards mid-screen, just those two throws is going to completely corner you, and then you're kind of up shit's creek. Now, while this might work as a way to deal with the dash and technically the dash throw and technically the dash crouching light kick, it leaves you open to dash down parry, or even dash forward parry in some situations. And it also leaves you open to other things from Chun as well, which is not exactly where you want to be. So as an example, if I do stand light kick as I'm waking up and she does forward roundhouse, it's going to smack us in the face. If I try to guard jump, the stand roundhouse will also hit us and push us away if I'm trying to guard jump backwards. And if I neutral jump, it's still going to hit us if we don't hold up immediately. But if we're just holding up or just holding up back, it defeats this option. So the slight delay in your decision matters because you can't guard jump the crouching light kick at meaty timing, so you have to delay your jump very slightly, which makes this a perfectly feasible option to defeat both your guard jump and your standing light kick. So the next problem that we have is that if we're trying to avoid throw and we're trying to avoid stand roundhouse, back fierce just hits us if we're holding up. However, back fierce loses to stand light kick. So this is another problem that sort of forces you to be crouch blocking as you are dealing with this situation, which opens up Kara throw from Chun-Li again. And this is a problem because if it hits both of your jumps, mostly at a timing where you can't jump back parry, you're going to be pushed more towards the corner as well, and Chun-Li gets the spacing essentially of a double throw situation just off of you getting hit. And if you down parry to try to deal with the crouching light kick or a potential crouch medium kick that could come, then you end up getting hit with back fierce fireball super, and you die. Now, if Chun-Li wants to do dash crouching MK, standing light kick beats it, and jump beats it. So in a realistic sense, there's not really much that she should be doing this for. However, she can obviously go for dash down parry into crouching MK as a way to get her super. And if you do happen to jump back, then that's a great situation for her. Because you're essentially almost cornering yourself. But if you neutral jump, it's a little bit worse because it forces that neutral jump situation from are you going to dive kick, are you going to empty jump, are you going to whiff dive kick, hit them, etc. Or are you going to come down with jump HP, jump roundhouse. So Chun-Li has to be looking for your jump and decide if she wants to dash forward if you jump back to maintain spacing, or if she wants to intentionally like try to anti-air with back fierce or anything like that. But dashing up with crouching MK sort of also shows how the Yun is looking to defend against it, because if they block the crouching MK, it means that they are very susceptible to the dash throw or something. Standing MP is also an underrated choice off of something like this, because it forces the proximity guard and puts a similar situation to the one that I talked about in the corner. Now, if we try to, guard jump this, we're just going to get hit standing in a lot of cases, or we're going to get hit in a situation where we're just off the ground, and it pushes us back just like the back Fierce Punch does. So it's a screwed if you do, screwed if you don't sort of situation, because you're out of range for throw off of this close standing medium punch, or this just standing medium punch at this range in general after the dash from the throw. But this also will lose to standing light kick. And because this loses to standing light kick, it comes down to how is my opponent defending. If they're YOLOing stand light kick, obviously the choices that lose to it isn't great. But in most cases, the rock, paper, scissors comes down to is my opponent going to block or jump, because guard jumping here is very risky. Her last real choice is sweep. Now, sweep will beat crouching light kick, sweep will beat holding neutral jump, and sweep will beat guard jump, back jump, because of the slight delay that you need to block. All of these allow her to dash up and get Oki. And this isn't a great situation to be in, obviously. It does lose to that standing light kick, but you have to be really on point with your timing, because if you're not, you're going to end up in this situation where you get knocked down just like as if you were to try to contest with crouching light kick or to contest with a crouch tech to try to deal with the dash Kara throw. And because it gives her a knockdown and it gives her Oki, it's very dangerous. And it's one of the tools that you have to watch out for when she is actually doesn't have meter, right? Because if she has meter, she might be looking for that back HP, or she might be looking for, the frame traps that she can get, or perhaps that standing MP that still catches you grounded. But this move in general is also very strong because of the interactions that it has. Now, this sets up all sorts of the rock, paper, scissors, where you have to know, based on meter and based on your opponent's tendencies as the young player, if parrying is even worth it. Because, if we get a parry here, we can get a good follow-up. But if we get a dash here, we can't really contest with anything other than crouching MK. Yeah, she's relatively close to the corner and we got our meter, which is good. But just because standing light kick beats a couple of the choices doesn't mean that it's always going to be a strong choice. It comes down to that situation of, what is my opponent doing? How can I counter it? And the interactions between the players. But Chun-Li is clearly in the advantage here because she can counteract this. And she has so many tools to counteract your decisions if you are trying to guard jump without a delayed guard. And she's also able to follow up with throws if you are option parrying too much. So you're in a screwed if you do, screwed if you don't situation, because if you're standing there and you're crouching and you're trying to deal with Chun-Li's choices, and you're YOLOing your parries, you're YOLOing your jumps, all these other things, it can very easily be taken advantage of. And most of these situations either give her Oki or give her a knockback situation, which is just as bad as the throw. Yes, you're able to act, and there's no real Oki off of a second throw, but being able to block and then delay tech is probably going to be one of your better choices. Or just guard jumping for a neutral jump if they decide that they're looking to start their conditioning with their grab, or their Kara grab. But because this situation is so dangerous, blocking is going to be the most common and safest decision from Yun. Because of all the choices that Chun-Li has to interact with your guard jump, interact with your YOLO jumps, and to interact with your decisions to attempt to press buttons, be that crouching light kick or standing light kick. And if she delays any of her decisions so that your standing light kick doesn't actually connect, then you can get whiff punished as well, technically. So it's a very weird situation to be in, and it's a situation that clearly is Chun-Li advantaged. I want to talk about Chun-Li's throw game in depth, because this is one of the most annoying things to deal with, because the corner is just as bad, if not worse, than the mid-screen situation. Now, I've already talked about this a little bit, but it definitely needs some more covering, because the fact that she has the best shimmy game in the game by being able to walk forward and then walk back and still be able to throw you, or just delay her decision and walk back and be out of throw range, is actually ridiculous. Now, the fact that she can late walk back and still be in range for Kara throw is ridiculous. Also, she can walk just out of normal throw range and still threaten with roundhouse Kara throw, which opens up SGGK, and it covers Yun's crouching light kick, his standing light kick, his crouching MP, and his close standing light punch, or far standing light punch technically. Both of these are low parryable. The only thing it doesn't cover is far MP, close standing medium kick, close standing heavy punch, and roundhouse, essentially. So she can literally throw walk back SGGK, or walk back sweep, or walk back fierce punch, or crouching MK, or whatever. And all of these tools deal with the options that you have available. Even if you're trying to guard jump out, she can still walk back at a timing that will allow her to hit you. And that's the next thing that I want to showcase, is what happens when Yun tries to guard jump out. Because that is technically the safest option. Or, not the safest option, but the least risk option select. Unless your opponent is specifically trying to take advantage of it. Yun is set to guard jump, which means that he will block your meaties, and he will jump your throws. So, this situation leads to some problems, because Chun-Li can walk back and she can still be in range for Kara throw, right? So if you jump out, that's good for you. But if she walks back into stand far medium kick Kara throw, then she can still technically anti-air you on the opposite way as you're coming down. And this is a really shitty situation, because it means that in general, if you are trying to jump out of the corner and you're guard jumping, you're not guard super jumping, which is very difficult to get consistently, in my opinion, then you're kind of putting yourself in this bad situation by jumping forward. And if you neutral jump or jump backwards, you're not really getting anything. If she hits you in the air, you're reset and you're put in this very bad situation as well. So, on the plus side, you can get out, but on the negative side, you have to parry on the way out, and then also jump away or interrupt her trying to throw you, or throwing yourself and having it tech and then push you back to, pseudo mid-screen / neutral. And while it's still a good thing to get out of the corner, obviously, there are a lot of hoops that you have to jump through to get there. These hoops are namely her ability to hit you out of guard jump and keep you grounded, technically. So she can use close stand roundhouse, MP, back fierce, crouching MK, all these things. And she can also delay her walk back a lot so that she hits you at a timing that would hit this guard jump relatively consistently. And because guard jump is something that is only really good if she's doing like crouching MK in a lot of cases, in my opinion, you really have to worry about, her doing crouching light kick, because like in these situations, she's still in range to just tap forward and carry throw. And also, she's in range to use it as a way to also add secondary layers to frame traps that will hit your attempts to guard jump after her lights. So in the corner specifically, like trying to guard jump after blocking her lights is extremely risky, even more so than mid-screen. Because like, all she has to do is delay that fierce punch just a little bit, and it's going to smack you right back down. Same thing with back HP, is that it's going to be a frame trap just off of that crouching light kick that stops the jump altogether. So it's the same thing here, where she can walk back and she can do back fierce into fireball super, or she can do just back fierce. Whether this connects or, gets blocked, she's going to be pushed back to right under the timer, and she gets to now go for the normal sort of goaltending sort of situation. So the hoops that you have to jump through are, you have to get through hit confirms that are meant specifically to be timed to beat guard jump. These things will also beat crouch tech. So if you think that your opponent is going to walk back carry throw, then they can walk back, hit a button, and hit your attempt to crouch tech them. This makes teching Chun's throws also relatively dangerous. So guard jumping and teching are dangerous. Option parrying is dangerous because she has access to highs and lows that can deal with your decisions, because she has access to back fierce. She has access to close stand roundhouse. These are both highs. And then she has access to standing medium punch, which is also super cancelable. Crouching light kick, crouching medium kick. She has sweep, which is high-low parryable. Crouch jab, which is high-low parryable. But the things that she would be doing that are high-low parryable are for specific reasons. And her being able to dictate that she just barely walks out of range means that she can set up, crouching light kick into carry throw, or she can set it up as a frame trap as well. So the fact that she can frame trap off of her ability to deal with your guard jump is also really dumb, because she can walk back and then just wait, and then crouching light kick your attempt to jump after your guard. And then she's +3, and she gets frame trap, crouching medium kick, back fierce, standing medium punch, all these other decisions, right? And the other fact is that, like, when she does this, she can just walk back and then fierce punch. And this is something that, like, you'll see Nuki or Rikimaru do ever so often, where at the same time they can do standing medium punch to stop jump outs. And they both push back to about the same position. Same thing with back HP. You're going to be pushed under the timer so that you're actually, like, put in a good position to deal with the fallout of the situation. Now, because of this, you have the ability to sort of decide how you want to approach the post attack thing. Now, as I've already gone over, though, if Chun-Li, walks back, she's still in range here to sort of contest potential jump outs for you blocking or guard jumping and blocking the crouching MK if she does it as like a meaty timing. So you guessing high-low means that you're, especially if she has meter, putting your life on the line that she's not going in the opposite direction. And that she can hit at meaty timing and at a timing to hit guard jumps while walking backwards and still threatening another throw off of carry throw is obscene. And because there's so many options that she has to keep you in the corner, and even if you do manage to jump, she still technically controls the situation. Because of those mediocre dive kicks and the neutral jump attacks, Yun only has so many options until she sort of gets to this position where neutral jump becomes slightly different because Chun-Li has to look for the light kick dive kicks. She has to look for a bunch of things. Whereas if you're going to empty jump and you land, she has to walk forward to contest your decisions, and the only thing as she's walking forward, unless she actually walks forward a lot, is going to be far standing heavy punch. And if she pushes herself back here, you have even more room to actually deal with the situation. And while her being under the timer and a little bit further back and able to goaltend is good for her, it's also good for you because it gives you the ability to build meter a little bit, and she has to be respectful of the choices that you can make because you can jump forward, you can neutral jump, and all of these things. And she has to react to how you want to decide that you're looking to get out of the corner. And the best Juns are ones that actually can stay in the corner or intentionally corner themselves to get Chun-Li to move forward to specific spacings. I can't tell you how many times I've seen Yakun make a decision and then jump back, fierce punch, and put himself in the corner because he knows he can get 2 crouching medium punches before Chun-Li is in range to fierce punch, and then he has dive kicks that can deal with the situation, or he can sort of goad Chun-Li into the situation so that he can jump over her. So now that we've established that the hoops that you have to jump through are so annoying, you also can just walk back and then deal with them jumping out by jumping at their face. And the only thing that Yun really can do is dash punch under you. In which case, as you're jumping forward, you can still jump off the wall. And if you make the decision to, walk back, jump forward, you can still jump off the wall. So essentially, if you land this, and then you get to reposition to make your opponent deal with all of your things while limiting the opponent's options, is hyper oppressive. And while, yes, dealing with this when she doesn't have meter is a little bit easier, it doesn't change the fact that all of these things interact with all of Yun's options very profitably. And regardless of if he's able to get into the air, he still has to take a lot of risks to get out of this situation. Whereas she can just sort of do things, and as long as Yun isn't just guess parrying, then she's gonna be good. But as soon as Yun decides, okay, I need to be guessing, you really have to be careful with how you're approaching keeping him in the corner. That's not an immediate decision off of this, right? Because even then, if your opponent tries to jump out, you can just walk backwards and continue to walk backwards. So you can walk back and then crouch and then walk back as a reaction to the actual jump, so that they don't actually have the ability to really dive kick off of this jump either. It'll be another bad dive kick situation. So being able to 100% control the space at which the okizeme actually happens and the options that your opponent has based on that spacing is very important to understand. And, for a long time, Justin Wong made the most out of being able to just walk back and then get into range again, and not even really abusing Kara throw. He was the best Chun in the US, and he just kept things basic. So you don't necessarily need to do the fancy walk back Kara throw stuff in order to be successful here, but being able to walk back to that range and threaten with Kara throw still while having access to the other tools, without having to walk forward for that throw again, does sort of transform this to be even more oppressive. So while it is possible to like still mix your opponent up in their face, you know, whiffing down jab, like your Ken or something, um, to like open up the throw, make them sort of see the move, hold block, etc., etc. Try to prey on secondary reactionary things. All that stuff works still. So if you're not confident in your ability to like get into the perfect range for SGGK or anything like that, like to maximize the spacing of it, don't worry about it. Just sort of stay in your opponent's face and then change the timing on your moves to deal with either jumps or to deal with them waking up with specific things. So, you know, you have meaty timing, delay timing, you have your throws, you have your highs, you have your lows. All of those things are still strong in their face, just as strong as they are as you're walking backwards, but you give up some ability to deal with jump outs without actually doing that whole walk back thing. And if you want good examples of how strong this is, you can watch the Rikimaru versus Yakun set from 2011, I think it is, that the Shen has on his channel. Because Rikimaru really puts in work with the whole walk back, Kara throw sort of situation. And this is something that I believe he and MOV sort of pioneered as far as how that approach was used. But in general, just how much control that Chun has over the corner after a throw, regardless of the character, is obscene. And because you do have to guess to get out of the corner no matter what, it's all about picking up on opponents' tendencies. So if you're Yun, you really need to pay attention to how Chun-Li is looking to control you and sort of make your decisions based off of that, and not just have like baseline, okay, I'm gonna guard jump, okay, I'm gonna do this, okay, I'm gonna do that. Like, no matter what, at the highest level that this game gets played, everything is all interactions between what you see and what you haven't seen, what you know they know exists, all that stuff. So if you're playing against the Chun-Li and they don't walk backward and threaten the Kara throw and all that stuff, then you do have less to worry about. That is for sure. But no matter what, her strike throw is just great. There is one option select to rule them all, so to speak, where not just against Chun, but against characters that like to do frame traps and sort of delay throw sort of situations, this sort of beats everything. However, obviously it does have downsides. It'll still get hit by specific things. It can be forced to cause proximity guard in other situations, and it can be hit by just delaying your attacks a little bit more. Because it is a pseudo guard jump sort of situation. Now, normally a guard jump would be block for 6 frames, jump, and then crouch. But this is block for 9 frames, up throw, and then crouch. And this is something that MOV talked about when he came for Sunroot Cup and talked with Nika and them. It's also something that I saw actually done in practice off of this one situation that I'm showing here, where Chun-Li gets the throw and then she gets a dash. And this is a dangerous situation for Yun because Chun-Li has a lot of options here. And yeah, he can YOLO stand light kick if he really thinks that that's like the best choice, but because Chun-Li has dash up SGGK, it's usually better just to block and then take the mix-up afterward. So when watching footage of Derun that I took in Japan, he was doing this against a Chun-Li, and it was consistent enough during his games that it had to have been on purpose. So I had a conversation with him about it. And it's very difficult. The only players that I know that do this at any sort of consistency are him and Kuroda. MOV during his prime was probably doing this as well, just as consistently. But it's not something that I know very many people try, but there are players, obviously, that I don't know that may be using this. So the second option that Chun-Li has in this situation is crouching light kick into Kara throw. Now, the third option is that she can just dash up Kara throw. So essentially how this works is that you use 9 frames of your block, and then you hit up throw. And if Chun-Li does the dash Kara throw, you'll tech it at a delayed timing, essentially canceling the jump or interrupting the jump. If Chun-Li does dash crouch light kick, the crouch light kick gets blocked. And if she goes dash crouch light kick Kara throw, the Kara throw gets teched. And if they do dash crouch light kick crouch medium kick, then you end up in the situation where you block both. If she does dash crouch light kick delay crouch medium kick to try to catch some other decision, then you'll jump it. So it's very convoluted, and hopefully I can actually showcase it. This is extremely difficult to get because, as you can see, the inputs required for this require you to go down back to up throw to down back to up throw while still being able to block a actual frame trap. So this is the example of her doing the dash crouch light kick into Kara throw, where I get the actual throw. Or I tech it, I should say. So in this situation, as you can see, I'm able to do the block, up back, tech, and then block in time, and then up back tech. So this actually deals with the actual frame trap itself, which is hard to do consistently, but this does work. And obviously I'm not supposed to be doing up back tech, it's supposed to be up tech, but it is what it is. So there's a problem with this in that when Chun-Li is doing like this sort of frame trap, I messed up the input. But as you can see here, if she delays it a little bit and your execution is immaculate, you can get the correct jump timing, where you'll block the crouch light kick and then you will jump the delayed crouching MK. But if you're off by a frame or something, and because you do have a jump startup time, it can still hit you. It's not a frame trap anymore, but it will hit you if your execution is not perfect. So doing something like this is incredibly difficult in all the situations where Chun-Li is doing a crouching light kick, because reacting to that situation with this sort of an option select is nearly inhuman, because of how fast that is and how fast your pattern recognition needs to be as far as like dealing with your opponent's decisions. If they like to go for specific sort of sets of things, great. But this sort of an option select covers meaties, and it covers dash throw, and it covers dash meaty into Kara throw. But in the corner situations, you have to just react to the raw crouch light kick. And you also have to know that they're in range to Kara throw you afterward. And if they add this delay and you get the jump, you know, off of like this situation where even if I'm not doing the option select, I'm able to get the jump because she delayed her crouching MK, she can still do other things to deal with this. If she knows that you're option selecting with this, then, you know, you have to eventually add up throw parry, because otherwise she's just going to do crouching light kick, jump at you, and do stomp or fierce or something. So even with an option select that covers so many options, there are still some downsides. Nothing's perfect. And it will still lose to things like dash up, crouch light kick, back fierce, because it will hit the startup of your jump rather than um, crouching MK, which comes out a little bit faster. The back fierce can hit you out of the actual frame trap that would have been crouch light kick, crouch medium kick. Whereas crouch light kick into back fierce is not technically a frame trap. It is in the way that like you can't really deal with a lot of things from that, but it's not a delayed frame trap or a delayed decision in the way that this is, right? Whereas if she does dash crouch light kick back fierce or something, it's taking advantage of the fact that you're going to be trying to do jump tech. And as long as they can confirm the back fierce super off of this, then you're kind of screwed. But yeah, in general, this is why I say do not try this at home, is because even in the most optimal situations, it is hard as fuck.